Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Harry Potter is a story that shaped an entire generation. And what's truly amazing is how differently this story reveals itself as we grow older. We begin to see the characters through a new lens, noticing nuances we once missed, even sympathizing with those we used to find annoying or unlikable. Today I want to talk about such characters. Who are they? The underrated, the judged, or simply misunderstood? Let's find out. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Draco Malfoy. To many readers and viewers, Draco was nearly the series' secondary villain, a smug Slytherin, sneaky and arrogant. From the very first books, he evokes a strong dislike, especially in the Chamber of Secrets, where he openly expresses his disgust for mudbloods. In Half-Blood Prince, he's practically a Death Eater. It seems his path is set, and it's dark, but reread the books as an adult, and you see someone entirely different. Draco isn't a villain. He's a victim. Born and raised in a world where blood purity wasn't just a belief but an absolute. His father was a high-ranking Death Eater, his family deeply entrenched in dark ideology. Then came Hogwarts and Slytherin House, a nest of inherited prejudice. And yet, Draco began to doubt. His hesitation, his fear, his refusal to kill in the final books. These are his first steps toward an internal awakening. He isn't a hero, but he is human, and that we only truly appreciate with age. Number 2, Lavender Brown. Lavender, that clingy girl who got in the way between Ron and Hermione. She stirred up quite a bit of dislike among fans. Over the top, sugary, annoying. That's how many remember her, especially after Half-Blood Prince. But what if we look at her without Harry's biased perspective? Lavender turns out to be a fairly typical teenager, a girl experiencing her first love, a bit clingy, often insecure, but entirely genuine. She didn't do anything wrong. She simply wanted love and attention. And is that really a crime? Yes, her behavior could feel too much at times, but she was just trying to navigate relationships, clumsily, even awkwardly, but oh, so human. Seen through adult eyes, she becomes far less irritating and much more relatable. Number 3, Ron Weasley. Everyone loves Ron, or at least almost everyone. But over the years, his character has come under scrutiny. He's been criticized for jealousy, pettiness, short temper, especially after Deathly Hallows when he leaves his friends, overwhelmed by pressure. The films didn't help either. Many of Ron's most meaningful lines were handed to Hermione, making him seem like the comic relief. But Ron is so much deeper than that. He's the 6th child in a poor family, always in the shadow of his brothers, and then in the shadow of Harry, the most famous boy in the wizarding world. Being Harry's best friend is not as easy as it seems. And yet, despite all his inner struggles, Ron remains loyal. He comes back when it matters. He protects his friends. He hurts, but he never betrays. He's not a flawless hero. He's a real person. Number 4, Luna Lovegood. Among all the characters, Luna has always seemed to be a fan favorite. Bright, kind, odd. But in the best way, she captured hearts from the moment she appeared. But with closer reading, her character reveals unexpected depth. In the final book, Harry sees a photo of young Luna with her mother, and the girl looks completely different, neat, ordinary, peaceful. Not the quirky girl we're used to. Everything changed after her mother's death. Her father, though loving, couldn't replace the anchor she had lost. Luna chose to be herself, despite the world's judgment. Her eccentricities are not a mask, but a way to cope with grief, stay true to herself, and protect the light within her soul. And that's what makes her truly extraordinary. Number 5, Neville Longbottom. Neville Longbottom was never supposed to be a hero. He lost his toad, forgot passwords, tripped over his own robes. Other students laughed, even teachers looked at him with pity. But behind the nervous stammer and the shaking hands was a heart growing stronger every year. And when the world began to fall apart, Neville stood up while others ran. His past was already marked by tragedy. His parents, Frank and Alice, tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange. He visited them in St. Mungo's. They didn't know his name, but he kept going. He trained in secret. He led Dumbledore's army when no one else dared. In the final battle, with the castle in flames, Neville drew the sword of Gryffindor and cut down Nagini, Voldemort's last Horcrux. One clean swing, one quiet triumph. "You and what army?" he once shouted to Death Eaters, and he meant it. He became that army. He became what Hogwarts needed when heroes were gone. Neville never wanted glory, but he earned it with every quiet act of courage. He reminded us that bravery isn't loud. Sometimes it grows slowly, like roots breaking through stone. Number 6. Narcissa Malfoy. Narcissa Malfoy was easy to overlook. Cold eyes, perfect hair, always standing a step behind Lucius. She didn't shout. She didn't duel. She wasn't a Death Eater, just a mother from a dark house. And so we passed over her, until one moment changed everything. In the Forbidden Forest, Harry lay still. Voldemort sent Narcissa to check if he was dead. No one knew what she would do. But as she knelt beside him, she whispered, "Is Draco alive?" Harry nodded. And with that nod, she rose and said the lie that saved his life. "He is dead." She didn't do it for Harry. She didn't do it for the world. She did it for her son. A whisper of rebellion wrapped in silk and ice. That one choice cracked the foundation of Voldemort's army. The lie let Harry live. The lie ended the war. Narcissa, once the silent shadow of a pureblood family, became its most powerful defector, not with a wand, but with a mother's question. And in that moment, she did what no spell could. She chose love over fear. Number 7. Fleur Delacour. Fleur Delacour walked into Hogwarts like a storm, graceful, flawless, dazzling, too perfect to be taken seriously. To Hermione, she was shallow, to Ron a dream, to Harry a blur. Readers, too, dismissed her as vain and arrogant. She was part Veela, after all, beautiful by magic, admired by default. But that was only the surface. And Fleur, as it turned out, was never meant to live on the surface. When Bill Weasley was mauled by Fenrir Greyback, everything changed. His face was ruined. He would carry the scars forever. Molly tried to spare her son, suggested Fleur might not want to marry him now, but Fleur cut through the doubt with fire. "I am good-looking enough for both of us," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "I do not care how he looks. I am happy with him." In that moment, the mask fell, and what remained was not a beauty, but a warrior. A woman who loved fiercely, who stood firm when the world broke apart. Later, she opened Shell Cottage to the hunted, housed the wounded, fought in the war. She didn't do it for glory. She did it because it was right. Fleur never changed. We simply learned to look again. Beneath the perfect hair and polished charm was courage, loyalty, a quiet fire that refused to go out. Number 8. Percy Weasley. Percy Weasley always stood too straight. He polished his prefect badge, memorized ministry protocols, and corrected his brothers with exhausting pride. To the young reader, he was the annoying sibling, rigid, humorless, always with a rulebook in hand. And then came the betrayal. He turned his back on his family. He sided with the ministry, even when it smeared Dumbledore and ignored Voldemort's return. It hurt, not because he was evil, but because he was one of them. But Percy was never cruel. He was just lost. In a family of laughter and chaos, he wanted to be taken seriously. He wanted respect. And when the ministry offered structure and purpose, he took it. He believed what they told him, that his family was wrong, that loyalty to the system was loyalty to the truth. He wasn't a villain. He was a boy trying to matter. And like many who chase status, he only realized what he'd lost when it was nearly too late. He returned during the Battle of Hogwarts. Not in glory, not with a speech, but with an apology. "I was a fool," he told Fred, the brother he teased for years. They fought side by side, shoulder to shoulder just once. And then came the silence. Fred fell, and Percy broke. He didn't care who saw. He clutched his brother's body and screamed, a sound ripped from the gut of a man who'd waited too long to come home. That moment rewrote Percy. Not as the prodigal son, but as someone who finally understood what family meant. He wasn't the brightest Weasley, not the bravest, but he was the one who failed, admitted it, and came back. And that takes a different kind of courage, the kind you don't get from a ministry title, but from the heart. Number 9, Minerva McGonagall. Professor McGonagall never smiled without a reason. As children, we feared her stern voice and tight bun. Her eyes could silence an entire classroom. She gave detentions with the precision of a blade and rarely showed warmth. But growing older, we begin to see the truth. Minerva McGonagall wasn't just strict. She was loyal, brave, unbreakable. In the final book, when Voldemort is already marching toward Hogwarts, Minerva doesn't hesitate. She raises her wand and brings stone knights to life, declaring, "Hogwarts is threatened. Man the boundaries, protect us. Do your duty to our school." There is no fear in her voice, only command, only purpose. She doesn't flee, she doesn't tremble. She prepares her school like a general would a fortress, not because it's her job, but because these are her children. When Harry returns to the castle after months on the run, battered and exhausted, McGonagall looks at him not as a student, but as an equal. She duels Severus Snape to protect him, her former colleague, her own student once. Her loyalty is absolute. But she's not only power and order. After the duel, she whispers, "It's good to see you, Potter," with something soft behind the words. Something close to love. She never needed to say more. What makes Minerva unforgettable is her silence. She doesn't cry out like Molly. She doesn't fall like Sirius. She endures. Every choice she makes is wrapped in quiet strength. She believed in rules, yes, but she believed in justice more. In the end, she fought for Hogwarts not just as a school, but as her home, a home she built not with magic, but with belief. Number 10, Sirius Black. Sirius Black was the boy who laughed too loud, who broke rules like branches, who ran with wolves and believed he'd always outrun the dark. In the Order of the Phoenix, he leans against the fireplace at number 12 Grimmauld Place, smiling at Harry, but his eyes, they're not the eyes of a free man, they're the eyes of someone who's still in a cell. 12 years in Azkaban didn't just take his youth, it froze him there. He returned to a world that had already buried his best friends. He came back to find Remus quiet, Peter a traitor, James and Lily gone, and the only peace left. A boy who reminded him of everything he lost. He tried to be a father. He tried to be more. When he said, "You're not so unlike your father," it was love, but also longing. He wanted Harry to be James again, just for a moment. He gave Harry a room, a family name, and a place to feel safe. But he never quite knew how to be the man Harry needed. He was still the teenager who ran away from his pure-blood home, who laughed with James at school, who never got to grow up. There's a pain in that. Sirius loved fiercely, but he also clung too tightly, because love was all he had left. In the Department of Mysteries, his death came suddenly. A flash of light, Bellatrix's laughter, and Sirius was gone, just like that. But even that moment, tragic as it was, said everything. He died fighting for Harry, not because he was reckless, but because he couldn't stand to be locked away again. "Nice one, James," he shouted in the middle of battle. And for a second, we understood. He wasn't seeing Harry, he was seeing the past, the ghosts, the life he was never allowed to finish. Number 11, Molly Weasley. Molly Weasley used to seem like just Ron's mum, a kind woman who cooked well, fussed over her children, and shouted when needed. But reading the books as an adult, you start to see something else. Molly isn't just background warmth, she's the spine of her family, the steady heart in a world of collapsing safety. In The Half-Blood Prince, when chaos breaks into the burrow during the wedding preparations, it is Molly who holds the house together. She keeps joy alive even with fear pressing in through every window. She doesn't just love her children, she protects them with quiet, relentless strength. Molly opens her home to Harry without hesitation. She knits him sweaters, sends him sweets, worries when he doesn't write. She never asks for anything in return, You're not going to work. You're going to the ministry, she snaps at Arthur, in Order of the Phoenix, reminding him that even good men need direction. Her love isn't soft, it's fierce, and it holds. Then comes the final battle, the chaos in the Great Hall, Bellatrix Lestrange cackling, dueling Ginny, with the manic energy of someone who had finally been let off the leash. That's when Molly steps in. "Not my daughter," she screams, the line burning itself into the memory of every reader. In that moment, Molly Weasley becomes a warrior, not because she wants to fight, but because her child is in danger, because there's no one else, and she wins. She kills Bellatrix, not for glory, not for politics, but for love. That moment isn't random. It's the eruption of everything Molly has been all along. The woman who fed everyone, who held her family through grief and fear, who never let go. Her magic was never about power, it was about presence. Number 12, Severus Snape. He stood like a shadow in the torchlit corridors of Hogwarts, always watching, always listening. Severus Snape was a man of harsh lines and sharp edges, rarely offering kindness and never seeking sympathy. To the students, he was cruel and distant. To his colleagues, he was cold and secretive. And to the readers of Harry Potter, he was, for many years, the story's antagonist in black robes. But the truth, buried beneath decades of bitterness, reveals something more, a man torn between duty and desire, between darkness and redemption. Snape's story does not ask to be romanticized. His life was neither noble nor clean. He was not born into heroism, but forged it through fire, shame, and love. From his first appearance in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, he was marked as suspicious. Harry's first impression of Snape, the hook-nosed man, was looking past Quirrell straight into Harry's eyes, set the tone for a long misunderstanding. But those eyes held more than disdain. They held memory. They held grief. Before he was the feared potions master, Snape was a lonely boy from Spinner's End, growing up between the cold walls of an unhappy home. His parents, Tobias and Eileen Snape, gave him little comfort and no joy. In Lily Evans, he found a light. Her kindness to him as a child was not mere politeness, it was salvation. Their friendship shaped him, and though it withered with time and choices, it never truly died. Always, he would say later, and that single word would come to define the essence of his tragedy. Snape's life pivoted on choices, some made out of fear, others out of desperation. Joining the Death Eaters was not just a pursuit of power. For a poor, bullied outcast who had been humiliated by James Potter and his friends, Voldemort's ideology offered something intoxicating: control, a place. But Snape's moment of reckoning came not through spells or glory, but through a name, Lily Potter's name, on Voldemort's kill list. He had betrayed the one person he had ever truly loved. The agony of that moment defined him. In the Deathly Hallows, we learn that Snape begged Voldemort to spare Lily's life, offering anything in return. But Voldemort saw no reason to keep her alive. Her death shattered what remained of Snape's soul, and from that point on, his life became a penance. He turned to Dumbledore, broken and desperate. The man who had once embraced darkness was now consumed by regret, and he pledged himself to protect her son, not because he loved Harry, but because Harry was the last piece of Lily left in the world. This devotion wasn't kind or gentle. Snape never treated Harry with affection, never tried to forge a bond. In fact, he resented him. Harry was the image of James Potter, Snape's school tormentor, and every glance reminded him of pain. But he also saw Lily's eyes, and it was those eyes that anchored him. Dumbledore once told Harry, "He does not love you, but he has promised to protect you, and he does." That distinction is key. Snape did not become a father figure. He became a guardian in the shadows. His protection came at a cost. Snape lived a double life as Dumbledore's spy, returning to the Death Eaters after Voldemort's resurrection. Each moment, each breath, could have been his last. He had to lie, deceive, and manipulate, even when it meant being hated by those he saved. When he killed Dumbledore on the astronomy tower, he sealed his reputation as a traitor. Even Harry, for a time, believed Snape to be a murderer. But the truth, as always, was more complicated. That fateful night was not a betrayal, but an agreement. Dumbledore was dying, slowly, painfully, from a cursed ring. He asked Snape to end it swiftly and to maintain Voldemort's trust. Snape didn't hesitate. "You must be the one to kill me, Severus," Dumbledore had insisted. And so Snape did, not for ambition, not for gain, but for a cause larger than himself. The burden of that act haunted him, yet he bore it in silence. Silence, after all, was his constant companion. Snape never defended himself. He never sought praise or forgiveness. He allowed the world to hate him because it was necessary. His final acts, passing on crucial memories to Harry, revealing the truth about the Elder Wand and showing his deepest secret, were done not to clear his name, but to ensure Harry's survival. "Look at me," he whispered, with his last breath, desperate to see Lily's eyes one final time. It was not heroic, it was human. His memories, poured into the pensive, opened a window to his soul. There Harry saw the truth, a life shaped by longing and sacrifice. Snape was not kind to students. He bullied Neville, mocked Hermione, and was merciless to Harry. These are not actions to be excused, but they are part of the same broken man, one who had never known how to love gently. He was not redeemed because he was perfect. He was redeemed because he was willing to give everything, even his life, for the one person he had already lost. Snape's genius as a wizard is often overshadowed by his personality. He was one of the most skilled potion makers of his generation, capable of inventing spells and improving magical formulas. The Half-Blood Prince's textbook is a testament to his brilliance. Even Hermione, the brightest witch of her age, was stunned by his innovations. And yet he never boasted. His mind was a labyrinth of knowledge and shadows, always 3 steps ahead. Without Snape, Voldemort might have triumphed. Number 13, Remus Lupin. Remus John Lupin stepped onto the Hogwarts Express as a quiet man in worn robes, fast asleep under a tattered cloak. He made no effort to impress, no attempt to dominate the attention of the students. Yet, when Harry Potter and his friends first met him in The Prisoner of Azkaban, there was something magnetic about him, a subtle, quiet strength that didn't demand respect but earned it nonetheless. There was kindness in his manner, gentleness in his speech, and a sense of profound tiredness in his eyes, as though he had carried a weight for far too long. This was a man who had survived much and worn his scars with grace. But only with age does the true depth of Lupin's tragedy begin to reveal itself. Lupin was not just a beloved professor, he was one of the best that Hogwarts ever had. His defense against the dark arts lessons were not just informative, they were transformative. He taught with empathy, he understood fear because he lived with it. And when he taught his students to face boggarts, dark creatures, and even dementors, he wasn't just instructing them in magic, he was offering them tools he had used himself to survive a life filled with darkness. His lessons on the Patronus were particularly meaningful. "You need to think of a memory, a very happy memory, a very powerful memory," he told Harry, guiding him through the creation of the charm that would ultimately save his life. For a boy like Harry, who had known little happiness, Lupin's guidance was nothing short of a gift. But Remus Lupin was not just a teacher, he was a man who had been marked from childhood. Bitten by Fenrir Greyback at a young age, Lupin was cursed to live as a werewolf. That one attack changed the course of his entire life. He became a creature feared and shunned by wizarding society. The Ministry of Magic passed laws that made it nearly impossible for him to find work. He was forced into hiding, not just from others, but from himself. Even in his school days, Dumbledore's extraordinary kindness in allowing him to attend Hogwarts did not erase the fear that others might find out his secret. It was only the loyalty of James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew, his fellow marauders, that gave him any semblance of belonging. The marauders were Lupin's golden years. James, Sirius, and Peter didn't just accept him, they celebrated him. They became animagi illegally, transforming themselves into animals to keep him company during the full moon. It was an act of devotion and brotherhood that few would undertake. But even among friends, Lupin was cautious. He never spoke of his condition unless he had to. He internalized shame as though it were part of the curse itself. The wolf, to him, was not just a monthly transformation. It was a lifelong sentence to be feared, hated, and ultimately alone. His adult life mirrored this solitude. By the time he returned to Hogwarts as a professor, he had been living in poverty, unable to hold steady employment due to the stigma of his condition. Snape's casual cruelty in preparing the Wolfsbane potion was a reminder that even in a supposedly enlightened institution, his presence was barely tolerated. And when his secret was revealed, when Severus let it slip to the students that their beloved teacher was a werewolf, Lupin did not fight back. He simply resigned. "Parents will not want a werewolf teaching their children," he said with calm resignation. It was not the outrage of a man unjustly accused, but the weary acceptance of someone who had lived his entire life expecting rejection. Despite everything, Lupin remained a man of principle. He joined the Order of the Phoenix, stood against Voldemort, and risked his life again and again. He fought not because he believed the world would ever truly accept him, but because he could not stand to see it fall. He taught Harry about the Marauders, about his father James, giving the boy pieces of a past stolen from him. He became a quiet pillar of support, never seeking attention or credit. Yet inside him was a battle not with the wolf, but with the crushing weight of self-doubt and isolation. Lupin's relationship with Nymphadora Tonks reveals this inner struggle in its most heartbreaking form. Tonks, vibrant and fierce, fell in love with him openly. But Lupin recoiled, not because he didn't love her, he did, but because he believed he didn't deserve love. He told her she was young and beautiful, and deserved somebody whole. His self-loathing was so deeply rooted that even happiness felt like a betrayal. It took Tonks's stubborn courage to force him to see that love, even for someone like him, was not just possible, it was necessary. They married, and for a brief moment Lupin allowed himself joy. Then came the war. In the Deathly Hallows we see Lupin again trying to run from fatherhood, from the responsibilities that love had placed upon him. He appeared at Grimmauld Place offering to accompany Harry on his mission, leaving behind a pregnant Tonks. Harry, outraged, accused him of cowardice. "You're being a coward," Harry said, and Lupin, for the first time, cracked. The noble mask fell away to reveal a man who was terrified of passing his curse to a child, of failing as a husband, of being what everyone always feared he was, a monster. That scene, brief as it was a moment of raw humanity. Lupin wasn't heroic in the traditional sense. He was broken, frightened, and deeply unsure. But he kept going. When their son Teddy Lupin was born, hope returned. Lupin sent Harry a message saying, "He looks just like Tonks," and his pride was clear. That one line is all we get, but it carries the weight of years. After everything, Remus had a family. For a moment he had what he never thought possible. And then, as if fate could not bear to let him keep it, he was taken. Killed during the Battle of Hogwarts alongside Tonks, Remus Lupin died fighting for a world that had never truly accepted him. His son was left an orphan, just as Harry had been. The cycle repeated, cruel and unrelenting. Number 14. Arthur Weasley. Of all the characters in the Harry Potter universe, there is one who, with time, grows ever dearer to the hearts of mature readers, Arthur Weasley. As children, we saw him as the eccentric, red-haired father obsessed with plugs, batteries, and toasters. But in adulthood, when we begin to understand the quiet battles fought in everyday life, battles for dignity, kindness, loyalty, and love, Arthur emerges as a true hero, a man who never sought glory, but embodied goodness in its purest form. Arthur Weasley works in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, a modest and underappreciated department buried within the vast halls of the Ministry of Magic. It's not a prestigious position. He doesn't command influence like Lucius Malfoy. He doesn't bask in admiration like Dumbledore. Yet he chooses this path not out of laziness or lack of ambition, but because it aligns with his values. In a world riddled with prejudice and classism, Arthur chooses to celebrate the mundane aspects of Muggle life. His fascination with Muggle inventions isn't played for laughs, it's a form of reverence. He sees magic not as superiority, but as difference. When he asks Harry earnestly, "What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?" It's not mockery, it's genuine curiosity, the mark of someone who doesn't place himself above others, but seeks to understand them. His love for Muggles goes deeper than gadgets. He defends them when others mock them, and he instills this respect in his children. This is no small feat in a society where blood purity is still a lingering poison. Arthur doesn't merely tolerate Muggles, he admires them. He teaches that empathy is more valuable than power, and that kindness has a place even in the darkest times. When we watch him stand up to Lucius Malfoy in Chamber of Secrets, fists flying in flourish and blots, we see not just a father defending his family, but a man defending his ideals. At home, Arthur is the anchor of the Weasley household. He lets Molly take the lead, not out of passivity, but out of respect. He trusts her strength and never seeks to dominate or diminish her voice. Their partnership is built on mutual understanding, not ego. In a wizarding world where many marriages are cold alliances or burdened by pride, the Weasleys show what it means to love genuinely. Arthur never tries to be the loudest person in the room. He tries to be the kindest. And in doing so, he creates an atmosphere where his children can grow into brave, loving individuals. He never scolds Fred and George too harshly for their pranks, never pressures Percy to conform to his views, never judges Bill for his earrings or Charlie for choosing dragons over ministry promotions. He respects the individuality of each child, offering support rather than control. Even when Ron makes mistakes, Arthur doesn't shame him. He gently guides, always believing in the goodness of his son. It is no accident that the Weasley children, despite their missteps, grow into some of the most honourable characters in the series. One of the most powerful examples of Arthur's quiet heroism comes in Order of the Phoenix. When he is attacked by Nagini and nearly dies, the entire family is shaken. Yet what stands out is how deeply he is loved. The Weasleys don't just worry, they unravel. Harry, who has always feared being an outsider, watches Molly break down in tears, and Ginny sits with a hollow stare. This reaction is not just about fear of loss, it's a reflection of what Arthur means to them. He is not just their father, he is their foundation. Arthur's bond with Harry is especially significant. From the beginning, he treats the boy not as a celebrity, not as the chosen one, but as a child who needs care. He gives Harry space to breathe, offers him rides to the Quidditch World Cup, and defends him even when the Ministry turns its back. When Dumbledore needs someone trustworthy to escort Harry to the Burrow in Half-Blood Prince, it's Arthur who arrives. No one questions his loyalty. His warmth and integrity speak for themselves. He never boasts, never claims credit. When Harry brings up Sirius's death in Order of the Phoenix, Arthur doesn't offer platitudes or hollow comfort. Instead, he gives him quiet understanding. He doesn't pretend to have all the answers, he simply stands beside him. And in the face of grief, this is sometimes the most powerful thing one can do. While so many wizards chase power, Arthur Weasley consistently chooses decency. When the Second Wizarding War escalates and fear sweeps through the magical world, Arthur doesn't retreat. He joins the Order of the Phoenix. He risks everything: his job, his life, his family's safety. Not because he expects reward, but because it's the right thing to do. He knows what's at stake. He knows the pain Voldemort has caused. And he refuses to let fear silence his conscience. When the Ministry begins its campaign of propaganda and control, Arthur quietly resists. In Deathly Hallows, he continues to help those in need, even as danger closes in. Despite working inside the Ministry, now deeply compromised, he feeds information to the Order, risking exposure every day. He never lets fear dictate his actions. It is bravery, not in grand gestures, but in steadfast commitment to goodness. Unlike other fathers who would have tried to stop their sons from joining a war, Arthur allows his children to fight for what they believe in. He understands that courage must sometimes override protection. He supports the twins' joke shop even when others scoff. He respects Hermione though she challenges authority. He welcomes Luna even in her strangeness. He does not seek to mold others into his image. He cherishes them as they are. Arthur is also remarkably open-minded. In Goblet of Fire, he defends Hermione when Rita Skeeter paints her as a heartless seductress. He listens to Muggleborns and half-bloods, not just tolerating their stories, but embracing them. In a society built on hierarchy, Arthur practices equality. He doesn't need a title to lead. His morality is enough. Number 15. James Potter. For many readers, James Potter begins as a legend. He's introduced not through his own actions, but through the fond recollections of those who loved him. Sirius Black's defiant grin as he speaks of the Marauders, Remus Lupin's quiet nostalgia, and the silent reverence with which Dumbledore mentions his name. He was, to them, a light in dark times, a boy who stood up against Voldemort, a man who died protecting his family. In those early moments, James Potter is less a man and more a symbol. Courage, laughter, friendship, sacrifice. He is everything Harry never had and everything he longs to be. But the pedestal begins to tremble when Severus Snape's memories fall into Harry's hands. The scene in the 5th book, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, in which Harry uses the pensieve and sees his father for the first time, is jarring. James, only 15, sits by the lake in the sunshine, basking in the attention of his peers, toying with a snitch. He seems charming, until he turns cruel. With no provocation, James hexes Severus Snape, hoists him upside down, and humiliates him before the crowd. "Snivelus," he calls him, smirking, while Sirius looks on with laughter. Lily Evans pleads with him to stop. James only shrugs and ruffles his hair, trying to look cool. The image is stark, unsettling. It's not the father Harry imagined. It's not the hero we expected. This dichotomy is what makes James Potter more real, and paradoxically, more lovable. He is not a saint, he is not flawless. He was a teenager with too much confidence, too much power, and a desperate need to impress. He was arrogant, sometimes mean, and quick to judgment. But the greatness of James lies not in who he was at 15, but in who he chose to become. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, we learn more. Dumbledore tells Harry that James changed in his final years at Hogwarts. He matured. He became a head boy, not because of his grades, but because he earned the respect of his peers and teachers. He stopped hexing Snape, not because he feared consequences, but because he began to understand the cost of cruelty. And most importantly, he won Lily Evans over, not through persistence or tricks, but because he became a better man. It's easy to judge James by a snapshot from his adolescence, but who among us would want to be remembered only by our worst moment at 15? Snape's memories, while painful, do not tell the full story. They show us a moment of shame, but not the years of growth that followed, and those years are where James becomes someone worth admiring. By the time the First Wizarding War begins, James is a member of the original Order of the Phoenix. Alongside Lily, Sirius, Remus, and others, he fights against Voldemort's growing darkness. He is targeted by Death Eaters. He is marked for death, and he does not run. He stays, protecting those he loves, even when he knows what it might cost. It is Lily and James who defy Voldemort 3 times, as the prophecy foretells. It is James who tries to hold him off without a wand, so Lily and Harry might have a chance. This moment, the last of James's life, is crucial. He is not the boy who hexed Severus by the lake. He is a father, unarmed, standing between the most feared wizard of all time and his child. There is no grand duel, no dramatic standoff. There is only a door, a scream, and a sacrifice. And that, in its simplicity, is what makes James a hero. He does not die in battle. He dies in protection. His death is not glorious. It is human. Lily's death, often rightly praised for its magical significance, overshadows James's, but his choice to stand and fall without hesitation is just as important. He does not have a mother's magic to shield his son. He cannot offer ancient spells or divine protections. He gives what he has, his body, his life. And in that moment we see the full arc of James Potter. The boy who once thought the world revolved around him now dies for something greater. We also learn through Sirius that James's loyalty was unshakable. He'd have died for any of us, Sirius says in The Prisoner of Azkaban, and we believe him. He didn't just grow up, he grew into someone others could trust with their lives. He took Remus Lupin, a werewolf, and made him a brother. He forgave Sirius for his recklessness and stood by him. He even showed mercy to Peter Pettigrew, who would later betray him. It's ironic and tragic, but it also shows James's capacity for faith in people, even when that faith was misplaced. His marriage to Lily Evans is another turning point. Lily, sharp, principled and brave, would never have married a bully. She saw something in James, a man worth loving. In the Deathly Hallows, when Harry sees the image of his parents in the mirror of Erist, it is not power or glory he sees, it is love, family, peace. James became the kind of man who could give that to someone. And that matters. Harry's journey, too, is a reflection of James. Though he never knew his father, he inherits his strengths and fights his same demons. Harry can be impulsive, arrogant and stubborn, just like James, but he also shows growth, love and sacrifice, just like James. The similarities remind us that identity is not fixed. One's past doesn't define one's future. Change is possible, redemption is real. Even Snape, who hated James with a passion that endured beyond death, could not deny that James had qualities worthy of admiration. In the Deathly Hallows, when Snape finally reveals his memories to Harry, there is pain, yes, but also a grudging acknowledgement that James was not entirely what he seemed. Your father was a swine, he spits. But later, when Dumbledore tells Snape that James gave his life for Harry, even Severus cannot argue with that truth. The man he hated died, protecting the son of the woman he loved. James's life is full of contradictions, and that is what makes him compelling. He is not the flawless martyr of fairy tales. He is not the villain of Snape's memories. He is a boy who made mistakes, a man who learned from them, and a father who gave everything. In that arc, we find something deeply human. We see the possibility of change, the beauty of growth, and the nobility of sacrifice. One of the most overlooked aspects of James's story is his humour. In dark times, humour is a form of rebellion. The Marauders, James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter, created the Marauders' map not just as a prank, but as a tool of resistance. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, the map speaks to Snape with mocking defiance. Mr. Mooney presents his compliments to Professor Snape and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business. This is not mere immaturity, it is courage dressed in mischief. They were boys in the face of war, trying to keep the light alive. Even the choice of animagus forms tells us something. James becomes a stag, a noble creature, proud and protective. He uses this form not for glory, but to help Remus during his werewolf transformations. The animagus transformation is incredibly difficult and dangerous, yet James mastered it out of loyalty. He risked everything so his friend wouldn't be alone. That's not something a bully would do. His presence is felt long after his death. In the Goblet of Fire, when the shadows of Voldemort's victims emerge from the wand, James is there. He tells Harry, "Your mother's coming. She wants to see you. It will be all right. Hold on." These are not the words of a ghost. They are the final comfort of a father who never stopped watching over his son. James, even in death, remains a guiding force. In the Deathly Hallows, as Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest to face death, it is James who walks beside him. "Stay close to me," Harry says, and James replies, "Until the very end." In that moment, James is not just a memory. He is strength. He is the courage that Harry draws upon to do the impossible. He is the love that transcends death. To love James Potter is to accept that people are not born heroes, they become them. It is to understand that growth is messy, that redemption is not easy, but that it is always possible. James is a testament to the idea that our past does not doom us, that a boy with too much pride can become a man worth dying for. There is comfort in knowing that someone flawed can still do the right thing in the end. James Potter does not need to be perfect to be heroic. His imperfections make him real, and in that reality we find hope. Hope that we too can become better. Hope that our worst moments don't define us forever. Hope that when it matters most, we can choose love over fear. So when we think of James Potter, not the myth, not the mistake, but the man, we find someone worth admiring, not because he was always right, but because he learned, he changed, and when it mattered most, he chose to be brave. And in doing so, he gave us Harry. He gave us a world where love is the most powerful magic, and he reminds us that even those who stumble can rise and shine. Number 16. Cho Chang. Cho Chang is often dismissed. For many fans, she remains a side character, just Harry's girlfriend, the one who cried too much, the one who faded into the margins of the story. She appears and vanishes quickly, leaving behind only fragments, a kiss in the room of requirement, tears by the owlery, awkward glances in the corridors of Hogwarts. But returning to her story with older eyes reveals a different portrait, a deeper one. Not of a romantic subplot, but of a teenage girl quietly carrying the weight of grief, expectation, and isolation. Not weak, not annoying, just young and hurt. When we first meet Cho in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, she's introduced not as a fragile figure, but as a confident seeker for the Ravenclaw Quidditch team. She's skilled, fast, popular. Harry immediately notices her. She was a very pretty girl who played seeker on the Ravenclaw team, the book tells us, capturing her, as she was then, radiant, admired even by Harry, who didn't yet know her voice, her sorrow, or the ghosts that would soon follow her. But everything changes in the Goblet of Fire. Cedric Diggory enters the narrative as Hogwarts' golden boy, and Cho becomes his girlfriend. It's easy to forget that Cho and Cedric had a story of their own. Not a dramatic one, not filled with turmoil or tension, but something soft, quiet, and promising. She says yes to Cedric's invitation to the Yule Ball. They dance, they laugh, they begin something together that feels, to both of them, like the beginning of a real love. And then, abruptly, that love is severed, brutally, by Voldemort. Cedric's death at the end of the Goblet of Fire is one of the saga's most devastating moments, not because the reader knew him intimately, but because of the randomness and cruelty of his death. Kill the spare, Voldemort says, and a boy is erased. A 17-year-old boy, bright, kind, and noble. For Harry, that moment is traumatic. But Cho? She loses not just a friend or classmate, she loses her first love. She loses a future that had barely begun to unfold. In The Order of the Phoenix, Cho walks the halls of Hogwarts with grief stitched into her very presence. Her smiles are tentative, her eyes are often wet. She isn't a caricature of sorrow, she's a mirror of what happens when a teenager loses someone they loved and the world around them just keeps spinning as if nothing happened. Her friends don't know how to comfort her. Her housemates shift awkwardly in her presence. And worse, the truth of Cedric's death becomes a political tool, a lie to be suppressed, while Cho tries to mourn in silence. Adults reading The Order of the Phoenix often re-encounter Cho with the same youthful judgment they had as teens. She cries too much, some say. She was unfair to Harry, others add. But from a mature lens, everything about Cho begins to make heartbreaking sense. She's 16, her boyfriend was murdered, the school is in denial, the ministry calls Cedric's death an accident, the boy who survived, the only one who can confirm the truth, becomes her confusing anchor. When Cho and Harry begin their tentative relationship, it is a relationship born not of spark, but of shared trauma. Harry too is fractured. He has nightmares, rage, guilt. He has no idea how to handle his own pain, let alone someone else's. And Cho is looking for comfort in someone who is not yet capable of giving it. Their kiss, an iconic moment in the Room of Requirement, is soaked in grief. "She was crying," Harry tells Hermione. "We were kissing, and she was crying." That scene, often laughed at by younger readers, is, in fact, one of the most painfully honest portrayals of teenage trauma in the series. Cho isn't broken, but she is lost. She tries to be part of Dumbledore's army, to keep Cedric's memory alive by fighting against the regime that tried to silence his truth. But she's caught between loyalties. Her friend Marietta Edgecombe betrays the group to Umbridge. Not because Cho agrees, but because the reality of Hogwarts under surveillance, under the eye of punishment and power, terrifies everyone. In a world where trust is dangerous, Cho's world crumbles further. It's important to note that Cho never betrays Dumbledore's army herself. Her only mistake is trusting someone else not to, and yet even that mistake costs her everything. Harry, emotionally immature and exhausted, cuts her off. Her housemates distance themselves, and just like that, Cho's brief moment in the center fades. But the pain remains. What makes Cho Chang's story so tragic and so meaningful is that it reflects a very real kind of pain that's often invisible in stories about heroes. She is not a warrior. She does not have a chosen destiny. She is not the one who wields the Elder Wand, nor is she the last Horcrux. She is just a student, a girl, trying to survive in a world that grows darker each day. Her grief is not a subplot. It is her war, and she fights it quietly. The adult reader can see what teenage readers often miss. Vulnerability does not mean weakness. Cho's tears are not a flaw. They are evidence of her humanity. In a school where bravery is often defined by fighting Death Eaters, Cho's quiet endurance is a bravery of its own. She gets out of bed, she goes to class, she mourns without closure, and she keeps going. Her background, too, is overlooked. A Ravenclaw, Cho is brilliant and curious. She's also one of the few characters of East Asian descent in the series, a detail that carries weight in a predominantly white narrative. Her identity, while never deeply explored, matters. She represents a kind of diversity that could have added layers to her character had the books allowed it. But even in the limited space she's given, Cho leaves an impact. By the Half-Blood Prince, Cho fades from the narrative. She is mentioned briefly in passing. We hear she continues her studies. We know she survives. But we are left to imagine what becomes of her. And perhaps that's why she lingers so powerfully in the minds of adult readers. Because life is full of Cho Changs, people whose stories aren't front and center, people whose grief is misunderstood, people who loved and lost and had to keep walking. What if we had seen more? What if Cho had been given the chance to grow on the page the way Hermione or Ginny did? What if we had followed her path after Hogwarts, into adulthood, into healing, into becoming something more than Harry's ex? We are told in an interview by J.K. Rowling that Cho eventually marries a Muggle. It's an almost throwaway line, but even there, something resonates. She chooses a life outside the magical world. Maybe she sought peace, a world untouched by Voldemort's shadow. Maybe she finally let herself start over. There's something beautiful in imagining her that way, stronger, wiser. She carries Cedric with her, no doubt. But she no longer lets grief define her. She no longer seeks answers in the eyes of someone else's pain. She builds something new. Not everyone gets a redemption arc in the spotlight. Some find it quietly, far from the halls of Hogwarts. In a series dominated by heroism, destiny, and sacrifice, Cho Chang represents the quieter cost of war. She reminds us that grief is not always loud, that pain does not always forge heroes with wands held high. Sometimes it leaves behind teenagers sitting by the window, waiting for an owl that will never come, trying to smile when they no longer remember how. Harry never truly understood Cho. He couldn't. He was too busy running toward the storm. And that's okay. Their story wasn't meant to last. But adult readers can see now what Harry could not. Cho didn't need to be perfect. She needed to be seen. In rereading her chapters, the weight of her presence settles like dust that never quite disappeared. She is there in the corners, in the silence after Cedric's name is spoken, in the awkward glances at breakfast, in the way she brushes tears away before anyone can see. She is a portrait of grief and growth, and she deserves better than our scorn. The next time you read the books, pause when you reach the room of requirement. Watch Cho enter, hesitant, hopeful. Watch her cast her first Patronus in honor of Cedric. Watch her fight quietly even when the war inside her never stops. She was never just the girl who cried. She was someone surviving something no child should have to. And maybe that's why, as adults, we feel drawn to her. Not because she's dramatic, not because she's perfect, but because she is real. Her pain is real. Her mistakes are real. Her story is the kind that happens every day, off the page. And when we see her for who she truly was, a girl trying to love, trying to grieve, trying to heal, we finally understand Cho Chang deserved more. Number 17, Aberforth Dumbledore. In the sweeping epic of Harry Potter, where heroes are often cloaked in glory and villains in unmistakable darkness, one character remains largely hidden in the shadows until the final hour, only to emerge with the quiet dignity and pain of a man who has lived his entire life just outside the spotlight. Aberforth Dumbledore, the gruff and seemingly distant owner of the Hog's Head Inn, is that character. To many, he was just the eccentric barkeep in Hogsmeade, rarely engaged in Hogwarts affairs, but in the pages of Deathly Hallows he is revealed as a deeply human figure, filled with contradiction, sorrow, and understated courage. Unlike his famous brother Albus, Aberforth never aspired to greatness. He never courted fame, influence, or the regard of the magical elite. In contrast to Albus's charisma and genius, Aberforth was grounded, skeptical, and deeply wounded. His life was defined not by ambition, but by loss. The death of his sister, Ariana, was the defining tragedy that shaped the man he became. Her loss was not merely a chapter in his past, but a wound that never healed. Aberforth lived in the ruins of that pain, never forgiving Albus for what had happened, and never pretending that time or success could erase the cost of that day. The story of Aberforth is not one of glorious battles or grand victories. It is a story of quiet endurance. When the world looked to Albus as a beacon of hope, Aberforth stood back, a man who saw the world not in grand dreams, but in harsh truths. He saw early on the cost of idealism. He distrusted plans built on sacrifice, no matter how noble the ends. When Albus spoke of the greater good, Aberforth saw only the possibility of more Arianas lost. He argued, he fought, and ultimately he broke from his brother. Aberforth's realism is not cynicism. It is compassion shaped by suffering. His skepticism is not bitterness, but protection for himself and others. When Harry, Hermione, and Ron are on the brink of collapse, fleeing from the Ministry and hunted across the wizarding world, it is Aberforth who offers them sanctuary. He does not ask for gratitude. He does not expect praise. He does what needs to be done because he understands what it is to lose, and he refuses to let others fall when he can help. He becomes their lifeline in a world falling apart. From the back of the Hog's Head, using the secret passage into Hogwarts, Aberforth becomes the hidden gatekeeper of the Resistance. It is through his tavern that the students, the Order, and the survivors find their way into the school and into the final stand against Voldemort. Aberforth does not stand at the front, wand raised for all to see, but without him there would be no Battle of Hogwarts, no gathering of the last defense. His role is as vital as it is unseen. This uncelebrated heroism reveals the depth of his character. He is a man whose love is expressed in action, not words. He does not speak of loyalty, he demonstrates it. He does not make promises, he simply shows up. In the darkest moment, Aberforth stands beside the very people who once symbolized the ideals he distrusted. He shelters them not because he believes in prophecy or destiny, but because he believes in kindness. J.K. Rowling writes in Deathly Hallows, I'm not Albus. I'm not like him. I never was. I'm the one who kept his feet on the ground, that's me. This sentence encapsulates Aberforth's role in the story. He is the voice of those who remain grounded while the world dreams of legends. He is the ordinary wizard whose quiet decency stands as a counterbalance to the lofty pursuits of power and glory. And for many readers, especially in adulthood, it is Aberforth who feels the most human, the most relatable. His grief is not adorned with poetry. It is raw. It is unresolved. He does not offer profound insights into Ariana's death. He carries it like a stone in his chest, and in doing so he speaks for every person who has lived with loss they cannot make sense of, for whom no apology or explanation can ever be enough. His inability to forgive Albus is not a flaw, but a portrait of emotional honesty. Some wounds do not heal. Some betrayals, even unintentional ones, leave fractures too deep to mend. And yet, Aberforth is not hardened by grief. He is made more compassionate. He does not let pain turn him cruel. When he tells Harry about Ariana, it is not to blame, but to share the truth. He gives Harry the real story, not the one found in Rita Skeeter's books or the myths surrounding Albus. It is a moment of integrity and respect. He does not embellish, nor does he excuse. He simply tells it as it was. In that telling, another side of Aberforth is revealed, the protector. He had been Ariana's shield, her comfort, her constant. When their mother died, it was Aberforth who looked after her while Albus chased dreams with Gellert Grindelwald. It was Aberforth who insisted Ariana needed care, not causes. That insistence cost him his relationship with his brother. And when Ariana died in the three-way duel between the Dumbledore brothers and Grindelwald, it was Aberforth who was left behind alone with the silence. His life afterward is a testament to survival, not success. He remained in Hogsmeade, tending the Hog's Head, dismissed by many as a crank. But even there he was never truly idle. He joined the Order of the Phoenix, he watched over Hogwarts, he kept eyes on the students. He remained connected, if not openly involved. In his own way, Aberforth was always guarding, always watching, always prepared to step in when needed. And when the hour came, he did so without hesitation. He fought in the Battle of Hogwarts, dueling Death Eaters, defending the school he had never claimed as his own. There is no glory in his account, no speech or celebration, but he was there, a brother avenging the fallen, protecting the innocent, a man whose life had been shaped by tragedy, refusing to let that tragedy repeat. Aberforth's place in the final chapter is small on the surface but massive in meaning. He is the embodiment of those who do not fit the mold of traditional heroism. He has no prophecies to fulfill, no legacies to uphold. He acts not because he is chosen, but because he chooses. That distinction makes his bravery even more profound. In his final conversation with Harry, Aberforth shows something rare, respect. He does not belittle Harry's mission, though he questions its wisdom. He does not pretend to understand everything, but he acknowledges the boy's conviction. In his weary, gruff manner, he encourages him, not with fanfare, but with truth. That moment of support carries the weight of hard-earned wisdom. It is a blessing from a man who has seen too much to believe easily, but who chooses to believe in Harry nonetheless. This complexity, this balance between pain and love, between skepticism and action, is what makes Aberforth such a compelling figure. As readers grow older, they see the quiet strength required to live with grief. They see the courage in choosing kindness when the world has not been kind. Aberforth becomes a mirror for those who have suffered silently, who have supported others without recognition, who have loved without being thanked. He is not without flaws. His temper is quick, his judgments harsh, but they are not born of malice. They are shields, forged in years of disappointment. And even behind those shields his heart remains open. He feeds the students, he hides the fugitives, he fights the tyrants. He, too, dares to hope, even when he pretends not to. It is in this layered humanity that Aberforth earns the love of readers. He does not demand attention, but he captures it. He does not speak loudly, but his voice lingers. He reminds us that being a hero does not always mean leading the charge. Sometimes it means holding the door open. Sometimes it means telling the truth. Sometimes it means never leaving, even when the world forgets you. In a saga of enchanted artifacts and legendary names, Aberforth Dumbledore is a man of flesh and feeling. He is the brother who stayed, the caretaker who mourned, the fighter who never claimed the title. In his silence is strength, in his sorrow, love, and in his ordinary acts a kind of magic no spell can replicate. Number 18. Lily Potter. There is a soft glow that surrounds Lily Potter throughout the pages of the Harry Potter books, a memory more than a presence, a symbol more than a character. Yet for those who return to these stories in adulthood, Lily emerges not just as the mother who died for her son, but as a woman of immense courage, conviction, and kindness. Her story, often whispered through the recollections of others, becomes a quiet testament to a life lived not just with love, but through love. Lily Evans was not born into the magical world. Her roots lay in a small, unassuming Muggle family, where her gifts marked her as an outsider, even in her own home. Petunia, her older sister, responded to her magic not with wonder, but with bitterness. As readers, we see Petunia's disdain in sharp, cruel lines. "Freak," she called her over and over again. But Lily never responded in kind. There is no record of her retaliating, no moment of vengeance. Instead, she carried her pain with dignity, choosing not to let rejection poison her heart. At Hogwarts, Lily shone brightly. She was a student of exceptional ability, a favourite of Horace Slughorn, and someone even Severus Snape described as uncommonly kind. Her friendship with Snape, begun long before Hogwarts, reveals a Lily who was deeply empathetic, willing to see the best in others, even when the world saw only their worst traits. Snape, awkward, poor, and increasingly drawn to the dark allure of Slytherin and the Death Eaters, was not an easy friend to have, yet Lily remained by his side, cautioning him, guiding him, hoping he might choose another path. The turning point came when Snape called her the unforgivable. Mudblood. It was not just a slur, but a betrayal. That single word severed the bond they had, not out of pride or anger, but because Lily understood something essential. Love and friendship must be rooted in respect. Her boundaries were clear, her values unwavering. She could forgive many things, but not the renunciation of everything she was. Even in the shadows of war, Lily stood as a beacon. When others chose hatred, she chose compassion. When others sought power, she chose protection. It was not simply a matter of refusing Voldemort, it was the way she lived. Her choices, even in youth, were driven by conscience. She joined the Order of the Phoenix alongside James, risking everything not for glory, but because it was right. Her courage was not loud, not wrapped in robes of triumph, but steady and relentless. James Potter's transformation is often attributed to Lily. He was a brash boy, brilliant but arrogant, who bullied others with a casual hand. But Lily saw beyond the swagger. She challenged him, refused his advances until he grew into someone worthy. She did not fall for charm or status, she waited for character. And James changed, not because he had to, but because he wanted to be better for her. That is the power Lily held, not control, but inspiration. The night she died is remembered often, but the hours before it rarely are. Voldemort entered their home with a wand and prophecy. He offered her a choice. Step aside. Let the child die, save yourself. And she refused, not once, but again and again. Stand aside, girl, Voldemort told her, but she stood firm. Her final moments were not of fear, but defiance. Her love created a protection so ancient and powerful that even the darkest magic could not break it. What strikes the adult reader most is not just her sacrifice, but her life before it. Lily was not a martyr from birth. She was a woman who made choices every day. Choices to forgive, to protect, to believe in good even when it seemed impossible. Dumbledore said it plainly. She gave him a chance that Voldemort gave her, but she didn't take it. She died willingly. That willing death was not a single act. It was the final page in a long story of moral clarity and love. In Harry's memories, in Snape's regrets, in every whisper of her name, Lily lives on. Even Petunia, who buried her bitterness beneath layers of denial, could not extinguish the ache of loss. Her coldness when Harry arrives at Privet Drive is not just cruelty, it is pain, a reminder of the sister she could never understand and can no longer reach. Lily's absence burns as brightly as her presence once did. Slughorn, in his rare moments of honesty, tells Harry, "She was one of the brightest I ever taught. Vivacious, you know. Charming girl." Yet it was not her charm that mattered, it was her integrity. She was never swayed by status or fear. Her love for Harry was not passive, not an instinct. It was active and sacrificial. She studied, she fought, she resisted, and when the moment came, she stood between a wand and a crib and became legend. Her legacy is seen in the echoes she left behind, in Remus Lupin, who spoke of her warmth, in Sirius Black, who mourned her with a silent, crushing grief, in Snape, whose entire life was shaped by her memory, in Harry, who bore her eyes not just in colour, but in spirit, and even in Albus Severus, her grandson in name, who inherited the courage to be kind in a world that so often isn't. Rereading the series as an adult uncovers the subtle power of Lily's choices. The strength to love James despite his flaws. The wisdom to walk away from Snape when his path turned dark. The bravery to die, not because she wanted to, but because it was the only way to protect what she believed in. These are not the decisions of a saint. They are the decisions of a real, complex, deeply human woman. Lily's magic, the one that protected Harry, was not taught at Hogwarts. It was not in a textbook. It was ancient, primal, and rooted in the oldest magic, love. Love as powerful as your mother's for you, Dumbledore explained, leaves its own mark, and that mark endured long after her body fell. It shaped Harry's life, gave him strength, and haunted Voldemort to the end. There is something haunting in Snape's patronus, a doe, the same as Lily's. His love, twisted and possessive, remained frozen in time, but Lily had moved forward. She loved, married, mothered. She found joy in the everyday. Her life was not defined by Snape's longing, nor by the war that consumed it. It was defined by the values she upheld and the gentleness she refused to surrender. Lily was not a warrior in armor, nor a strategist in a tower. She was a friend, a sister, a lover, a mother. She argued, laughed, hoped. Her courage was not forged on a battlefield, but in kitchens and classrooms, in choosing compassion over convenience. She saw the monster behind Tom Riddle's charm and refused to fear him. She saw the goodness buried in James and called it forth. She saw the danger in Snape's choices and walked away. In many ways, Lily was what Voldemort could never understand. Her power was not in spells, but in spirit. She had nothing to gain, yet gave everything. Her love was not weakness, it was invincibility. Voldemort thought her mercy was foolishness, her refusal to step aside a fatal error. But that error became the downfall of the darkest wizard in history. When Harry walks into the forest to meet death, it is Lily who walks beside him, summoned by the resurrection stone. She tells him he has been brave, her voice soft and calm. In that moment, she is not the young mother who died in Godric's Hollow. She is timeless, radiant, whole. Her love guides him, not with force, but with presence. She is with him when it matters most. In the mirror of Erist, Harry sees his parents, but it is Lily's eyes he carries, her grace he inherits, his compassion, his loyalty, his unwillingness to let fear dictate his actions. These are her gifts, not tangible, not loud, but transformative. She shaped the boy who became the hero, not with grand lessons, but with the echo of her love. The wizarding world often glorifies the bold and the loud. Yet it is Lily, quiet and constant, who altered history. She made no headlines. Her name is not etched into the walls of Hogwarts. She left no books behind. But her story lives in every act of courage Harry makes. She is the heart of the tale, the pulse beneath the surface, the reason Harry survives. Adults see Lily differently because we understand now what it means to forgive and to draw lines. We understand the difficulty of choosing love in a world of war. We see the weight of her choices and the price she paid. She was not merely the mother who died, she was the woman who lived well enough to be worth remembering. There is a reason Harry names his daughter Lily. It is not just homage, it is hope. A belief that kindness is strength, that love is the oldest and strongest form of magic, and that sometimes the quietest characters change the world in the loudest ways. Number 19, Hagrid. Of all the characters in the Harry Potter universe, one stands apart not because of magical power or intelligence, but because of his unshakable heart. Rubeus Hagrid, the half-giant gamekeeper of Hogwarts, is a figure who only grows more beloved and respected with time. As children, readers often saw him as a comedic presence, a gentle giant with a love for dangerous creatures and a slightly clumsy nature. But with age, we begin to see him in a different light. We notice his pain, his resilience, and the quiet nobility in how he carries himself through rejection, ridicule, and lifelong injustice. Hagrid's story is not just about loyalty, it is about how unwavering kindness becomes a revolutionary force in a world defined by power. Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts at the age of 13, wrongly accused of opening the Chamber of Secrets and causing the death of a student. It was Tom Riddle, the future Lord Voldemort, who framed him, knowing full well that no one would question the guilt of a half-giant with a fondness for creatures most would call monsters. And yet, instead of growing bitter, Hagrid remained at Hogwarts under Dumbledore's protection, taking on the role of gamekeeper. He did not turn his back on the institution that failed to defend him. He stayed, he kept the grounds, fed the creatures, and eventually took on the additional responsibility of teaching care of magical creatures. He gave more to the school than it had ever given him. In a world that often judged based on blood purity, Hagrid stood as a symbol of inclusion. He wasn't a pureblood, wasn't even fully human by wizarding standards. Half-giants were feared, considered dangerous and volatile. But Hagrid never let this define his worth. When Dolores Umbridge used his heritage as ammunition to attack and belittle him, he bore it without retaliation. In Order of the Phoenix, her inspection of his class is humiliating, her words laced with prejudice. Still, Hagrid speaks gently to the students, shielding them from the venom of her authority. He never fights cruelty with cruelty. One of the most touching aspects of Hagrid's character is how he treats creatures that others deem unworthy. He raises Norbert the dragon, mourns Aragog the acromantula, and fights to preserve the dignity of even the most misunderstood beings. When Buckbeak the hippogriff is sentenced to death, Hagrid doesn't lash out. He fights through the proper channels. He sobs into his beard, drinks heavily from the pain, but still trusts Dumbledore to help. He believes in justice, even when it betrays him repeatedly. Hagrid's loyalty to Dumbledore is one of the defining traits of his life. He follows the headmaster without question, but not blindly. He does so with faith. In Philosopher's Stone, when Hagrid fetches Harry from the Dursleys, he brings not just news, but warmth. He is the first magical person to treat Harry like someone who matters. "Harry, you're a wizard." That line is etched into readers' memories, not just for its content, but for the tenderness in how Hagrid delivers it. He is the bridge between Harry's abusive past and the new world he belongs in. Hagrid becomes family. Even when facing danger, Hagrid is unafraid to do what is right. During the events of Chamber of Secrets, Hagrid is once again suspected of being involved in dark events. As he is taken away to Azkaban, he shouts, "If anyone wanted to find out some stuff, all they'd have to do would be to follow the spiders." He does not panic or plead for innocence. He leaves a trail of hope, trusting that those who care will find the truth. And they do. It's a perfect example of how Hagrid always tries to help, even when he's the one being wronged. His role in the war against Voldemort is quiet but significant. He never wields great spells, never leads battles, but he carries Harry's seemingly lifeless body back from the Forbidden Forest in Deathly Hallows, weeping openly. That image, Hagrid staggering under the weight of the boy he raised like a son, is among the most heartbreaking in the series. It encapsulates his love, his grief, and his role as the emotional anchor of the story. It's the culmination of years of caretaking, of watching Harry grow, and believing in him when others faltered. Hagrid also never loses sight of forgiveness. He befriends characters others scorn, including the cowardly Gilderoy Lockhart, and even his half-brother Grawp, a full giant with violent tendencies. Hagrid teaches Grawp kindness, patiently helping him learn words, respecting him when others would have left him in the wild. It's a subtle reminder that Hagrid's gift isn't magic, it's humanity. He finds worth where others don't even look. He chooses connection over fear. Even his relationship with creatures like Fang, his boarhound, is revealing. Fang is a coward, always trembling in fear during forest walks, but Hagrid adores him. He calls him a bloody coward with affection, not contempt. It shows that Hagrid doesn't love strength or perfection. He loves fiercely, especially those who are overlooked or unloved. It's this same trait that bonds him to Harry, Hermione, Ron, and later the entire Order of the Phoenix. He is loved not because he is perfect, but because he is utterly genuine. In the darkest moments, Hagrid provides light. When Fred Weasley dies, when the castle is under siege, when children are injured and hope is dim, Hagrid keeps moving. He doesn't break. He does not use a wand, not really. His umbrella hides the pieces of the broken one he kept since his expulsion. He doesn't need to duel to show strength. His strength is in surviving the storm and still being able to say, "Better out than in," that's what I always say. Hagrid's vulnerability makes him powerful. He cries often, a Buckbeak over Norbert, over Harry, but never once does he apologize for it. In a world where men are expected to be stoic, Hagrid redefines bravery. His tears are not weakness, they are proof that he feels deeply and loves without condition. That's rarer than any spell. It's what makes him unforgettable. He has no ambition, no hunger for power. When offered prestige, like when teaching at Hogwarts, he is awkward and uncertain. He does not seek fame, he seeks purpose. His joy is in raising creatures, tending the grounds, helping students. When Rita Skeeter smears his name in the Daily Prophet, calling him a dangerous half-breed, he hides in his hut. But he returns, not for glory, but because he knows the students need him, especially Harry. Hagrid's love for Harry is a quiet theme that echoes across all 7 books. From the first birthday cake he bakes, squashed in his pocket, to the last scene where he escorts the survivors from the battlefield, Hagrid is present. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry faces the dragons, it is Hagrid who cheers him on with trembling pride. "You did as much as your father would have done, and I'm proud of you." That pride is not earned through achievement, but through character. It's the kind of love that asks nothing in return. He teaches students more than how to handle hippogriffs. He teaches them to be gentle with the world. He teaches them that monsters are sometimes just misunderstood beings in need of care. He teaches that appearances lie and that the heart is what defines us. Hermione, so often focused on logic and rules, grows to understand this through Hagrid. Ron, who mocks Grawp and dragons early on, later fights beside Hagrid without hesitation. Hagrid's life is filled with sorrow. His father died when he was young. His mother abandoned him. He was denied the chance to learn, denied the chance to fully participate in the wizarding world. He was hunted by prejudice, isolated by size and nature. And yet never once does he turn his pain into hatred. He does not join Voldemort, though he easily could have. He does not hide in the shadows. He walks forward, battered but whole. When the trio visits him in Half-Blood Prince and he laments Aragog's death, they go not for the spider but for Hagrid. Even Harry, exhausted by Dumbledore's missions, finds time to console him, because by then they all know Hagrid is irreplaceable, not for his duties, but for his heart. He is one of the only adults who never lied to them, never judged them, never stopped believing in them. The final moments of the series confirm what readers grow to understand with time. Hagrid is not a side character. He is a symbol of what the wizarding world should be, accepting, compassionate, fearless in love. He may not cast the strongest spells, but he performs miracles of the soul. He reminds us that courage isn't always loud, and that the best kind of magic is the one that binds, heals, and protects. In rereading the books as adults, we come to love Hagrid more than ever. His flaws become charms, his strength becomes clearer. He is not just the man with the pink umbrella and the love for dragons. He is the heart of Hogwarts. His life, filled with quiet battles and small acts of heroism, is a testament to what it means to be good in a world that often rewards power over love. As the smoke of war clears and the castle stands broken but free, it is Hagrid who walks out with the survivors, no wand raised, no speech given, just present, just there, as he always was. And perhaps that is the real magic. Not changing the world through spells, but through kindness that endures. Let others take the spotlight. Let heroes be sung in ballads. Hagrid's legacy lives not in legend, but in the way he made others feel safe, loved, and seen. He is, in every way, the wizard with the strongest heart. Number 20, Dudley Dursley. No one expected to love Dudley Dursley. He was the boy with too many presents and too little empathy, the pudgy tormentor with fists full of sweets and a heart full of cruelty. At age 11, Dudley was every child's nightmare, a spoiled, tantrum-throwing bully whose parents, Vernon and Petunia Dursley, praised his every misstep and ignored every ounce of his malice. He wasn't just unkind, he embodied the small-minded meanness that the magical world so often battled against. And yet, something extraordinary happened. There's a quiet revolution in the way J.K. Rowling writes Dudley. It's almost imperceptible unless you're paying close attention. At first, he seems irredeemable. We meet him in Philosopher's Stone, wailing because he received 37 birthday presents instead of 38. His joy is rooted in cruelty. He breaks Harry's glasses, he throws tantrums in zoos, he revels in superiority, he calls Harry freak with delight and stumbles over his own self-importance like a prince in a broken kingdom. But Rowling never forgets that he is a child, and she plants a seed. The story begins its slow pivot in Order of the Phoenix. By then, Dudley is a teenager. He's grown tall and heavy from boxing and boredom, roaming little whinging in oversized hoodies with his gang of equally directionless boys. But for once, Harry is the one watching Dudley, not the other way around. That summer, something shifts. Harry, returning from a traumatic year at Hogwarts, notices a strange chill in the air. The world feels darker. And then it happens. The Dementors come. In one of the series' most powerful scenes, Harry and Dudley are attacked in a dark alley by soul-sucking Dementors. Dudley, who has always towered over Harry physically, is suddenly reduced to helplessness. He cannot see the creatures. He doesn't understand what's happening. He panics. And when Harry saves him with a Patronus charm, Dudley is not only confused but also changed. This is the first moment where we glimpse the fragility beneath Dudley's bravado. His fear is real, and so is Harry's heroism. It would have been easy to write Dudley as a punchline, to keep him trapped in the mould of the schoolyard bully who never grows up. But Rowling does something rare. She allows him space to evolve, not in grand speeches or sweeping redemptions, but in the quiet, everyday way that people sometimes change when they are forced to confront the unknown. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry overhears a conversation between Vernon and Petunia. They're trying to explain away what Dudley experienced. "What were you doing to that boy?" Vernon asks, suspiciously. "Nothing," Harry snaps back. But it's Dudley's silence that speaks volumes. He doesn't defend Harry, not yet. But he doesn't accuse him either. This silence is new. It's not filled with contempt, but confusion. Dudley is beginning to realize that there is more to the world than he was told, that Harry's strangeness may not be weakness, but strength. And though he cannot yet articulate it, he feels something shift. He has looked into the dark, into a place that no child should know, and he has come back with something unspoken, lodged in his soul. In Half-Blood Prince, Dudley appears only in passing, but the tone has changed. He no longer mocks Harry openly. There's awkwardness now, a lack of hostility. They live under the same roof, but no longer in direct opposition. Dudley's growth is slow, uneven, like most real human change. Rowling doesn't hurry it, nor does she make a spectacle of it. But when we reach Deathly Hallows, the final and most emotionally resonant sign of Dudley's transformation arrives, and it arrives with the power of understatement. The Dursleys must go into hiding. The Wizarding War has reached their doorstep. The Order of the Phoenix sends wizards to escort them to safety, and Harry is preparing to say goodbye. Dudley, awkward and massive, lingers. "I don't think you're a waste of space," he says to Harry. These few words carry the weight of 1,000 apologies. They are delivered with discomfort, hesitation, but they are sincere. In that moment, Harry is stunned. For a boy who once refused to share a toy, for a teenager who jeered as his cousin suffered, this is an act of courage. Emotional courage. The kind that's harder than throwing a punch. It's not just that Dudley thanks Harry, it's that he sees him, really sees him for the first time, no longer as a rival, an annoyance, a freak, but as a person who deserves kindness, and he offers it awkwardly but willingly. It's easy to miss the second gift Dudley gives, a cup of tea. It's mentioned briefly in Deathly Hallows that Dudley left Harry a parting gift, a tea mug. That detail might seem trivial, even humorous, but it is profound. For someone like Dudley, whose world revolved around selfishness, whose home was a fortress of comfort against anyone different, offering a cup is nothing less than an olive branch. Tea, after all, is a symbol of domestic peace in Britain. To offer someone tea is to welcome them, even in absence. In an interview, Rowling later confirmed that she imagined Dudley and Harry exchanging Christmas cards as adults. A small connection, tentative but real. They would never be close. Too much water had passed under that bridge, but they would not be enemies. Dudley, she said, had changed enough to raise children who knew that magic was not something to be mocked. This, more than any magical duel or daring escape, is one of the saga's most moving victories. For readers who grew up with the books, Dudley's evolution hits differently with age. As children, we recognize the unfairness Harry faces at Privet Drive. We see Dudley as the antagonist. But as adults, we begin to notice the layers. Dudley wasn't born cruel. He was shaped by Vernon's authoritarianism, by Petunia's obsession with appearances, by a house that rewarded tantrums and punished difference. He was taught to fear what he didn't understand and to bully what he feared. But when life confronted him with something darker than his own delusions, he didn't double down. He bent, he broke, he learned. That's rare in fiction, even rarer in real life. Dudley's arc is not just about redemption. It's about the hope of growth, the idea that even those raised in ignorance can find their way to decency. He doesn't become a hero. He doesn't join the fight against Voldemort. He doesn't pick up a wand, but he becomes better, kinder. He learns that strength is not in domination, but in humility, that sometimes offering tea to your cousin is more powerful than casting a spell. One might argue that the real miracle in the Harry Potter series isn't magic, it's empathy. And nowhere is that more evident than in Dudley Dursley. He reminds us that people change not always because they want to, but because they have to, because the world shows them something they can't ignore. And if they are brave enough, they respond with humanity. The boy who once cried over missing presents leaves behind a mug and a message. I see you, I'm sorry, thank you. And in doing so, he becomes, quietly, unexpectedly, one of the most hopeful characters in the entire wizarding world. Number 21, Madame Pomfrey. Of all the characters in the Harry Potter universe, few evoke as much quiet admiration in adulthood as Madame Pomfrey, the devoted matron of the Hogwarts hospital wing. In the chaos of curses, duels, dragons, and dementors, she is the still point in the storm. She is never the center of attention, rarely steps into the limelight, and yet she is always there, present, alert, indispensable. In youth, her presence might have seemed like a given, a dependable figure in the background. But as adults, with a fuller appreciation of endurance, sacrifice, and silent strength, we begin to see her for what she truly was, a heroine without applause, a healer in the truest sense of the word. Madame Pomfrey never wielded a wand in the Great Hall in dramatic fashion. She didn't ride a thestral into battle or destroy Horcruxes with burning resolve. She didn't roar orders in the corridors or lead armies, but time and time again she stood at the edge of life and death and brought people back from it. She bore witness to some of the most horrific injuries and deepest traumas that Hogwarts students ever faced, and she did so without hesitation, without complaint, and with deep, unwavering humanity. In Harry's second year, when he fell victim to a rogue bludger and had all the bones in his arm accidentally removed by Gilderoy Lockhart, it was Madame Pomfrey who restored him, though not without exasperation at the absurdity of the situation. "You should have come straight to me," she scolded, embodying that rare mix of competence and care. She worked through the night, brewing Skelegro and watching over him as his bones painfully regrew. She knew what had to be done, and she did it, regardless of how thankless or unpleasant it was. There is something deeply moving about her refusal to become desensitized. In a world of dark magic and hardened hearts, Pomfrey never allowed herself to become cold. Her reactions weren't those of a detached professional, but of someone who felt. When Hermione was petrified in their second year, Pomfrey didn't just treat her like another patient. She said gently, "She's not suffering, dear, otherwise I'd have notified you straight away." She offered reassurance and a sense of order amidst the panic and fear gripping the school. In the aftermath of the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, when Harry returns, battered and broken, Madame Pomfrey is once again there, mending wounds while trying to soothe souls. She is one of the very few adults who doesn't bombard him with questions or treat him as a symbol. She treats him as a boy who needs rest and healing. That subtle act of respect and protection speaks volumes. She gives the injured not just potions, but dignity. And in a world where heroes are often glorified for flashy acts, Pomfrey's heroism lies in her quiet constancy. When Katie Bell was cursed by a necklace in their 6th year, Madame Pomfrey didn't merely rush her into a hospital bed. She performed the complicated diagnostics and coordinated with St. Mungo's, ensuring the curse did not claim the girl's life. And yet, her name didn't appear in the prophet. Her portrait wasn't hung on the walls. She was never seeking glory. She simply did what needed to be done over and over again. During the Triwizard Tournament, Madame Pomfrey tended to injuries that defied normal medical understanding. Dragons and mermaids, underwater duels and magical mazes, none of it rattled her. She healed gashes, soothed burns, repaired tendons snapped by magical force, all while keeping an eye on the mental state of the champions. After Harry returns from the graveyard with Cedric Diggory's body, shaken and broken, it is Madame Pomfrey who tends to him. Though Dumbledore ushers the boy away, it is implied she remains close, watching over, ready to act. Pomfrey's resistance to being silenced or controlled is another admirable trait. When Dolores Umbridge attempted to seize control of Hogwarts, Pomfrey didn't cooperate. She continued to care for the students as they needed, not as the ministry dictated. When Marietta Edgecombe was brought in with severe pustules across her face, a consequence of betraying Dumbledore's army, Pomfrey didn't comment on the politics. She treated the girl with professional integrity, even as the staff around her seethed with conflicting emotions. Her loyalty to Albus Dumbledore was not born of naivety or idol worship. It was rooted in shared values. She knew what Hogwarts stood for, and that meant she had to be present for every child who walked through its doors, regardless of lineage, house, or behavior. She patched up Slytherins just as often as Gryffindors. She offered care to the Weasley twins after their various misadventures, just as she did to Draco Malfoy after he was wounded by the Sectum Sempra curse. Her job was not to judge, but to heal. Perhaps one of her most harrowing moments came during the Battle of Hogwarts. In the midst of violence and despair, she transformed the hospital wing into a last sanctuary. While spells exploded and lives were lost, Pomfrey worked ceaselessly, triaging wounds, closing arteries, fighting to keep students alive. It's easy to forget amidst the chaos that someone had to stabilize Lavender Brown, someone had to pronounce Fred Weasley, someone had to hold the hand of the dying and tell them they were not alone, that someone was likely Madame Pomfrey. J.K. Rowling never gave us scenes of Pomfrey sobbing or collapsing from exhaustion, but the emotional weight she must have carried is enormous. How many times did she treat the same student for reckless injuries? How often did she see young faces twisted in pain and push aside her own sorrow to tend to them? There is no doubt that Pomfrey loved the students fiercely and without reserve. Her love was not flashy, it was practical, nurturing, and deeply sincere. In The Half-Blood Prince, or when Ron is poisoned and nearly dies after drinking tainted mead, Pomfrey is there within moments. She and Slughorn work together, but it is Pomfrey who ensures that Ron recovers fully. He'll live, she tells Harry and Hermione, offering a small glimmer of peace in their spiraling world. Once again, she restores what could have been lost forever, and asks for no thanks. Madame Pomfrey's brand of magic is one rarely celebrated. She doesn't cast offensive spells or create elaborate enchantments. Her magic is quiet, steady, restorative. It's a magic that listens to a heartbeat and knows when to stop the bleeding. It's in the careful preparation of potions, the memorized countercurses, the sleepless nights watching over students as they moan in pain or cry out in nightmares. Her wand is not a weapon, it is a lifeline, and yet she is not weak. Her strength is formidable. She stands her ground when visitors attempt to disrupt her ward. "Out! Out!" she has shouted more than once. She draws boundaries, protects her patients, and refuses to let anyone, be they headmasters or auras, compromise their recovery. She is not just a nurse, she is a guardian, a silent sentinel at the edge of trauma. As we age, our view of heroism shifts. In childhood, we look to those who fight. As adults, we look to those who endure. Pomfrey endured. Through 7 years of chaos, dark lords, cursed objects, and fatal spells, she never walked away. She stayed. She gave. She healed. Even when her efforts were erased the moment a Quidditch match resumed or a new headline captured attention, she kept working. She represents a kind of love that doesn't announce itself, a love that shows up again and again without expecting applause. In the words of Dumbledore, help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. That help often wore a starched apron, carried a steaming goblet of potion, and answered to the name Madame Pomfrey. And for every time we passed over her in our youthful readings, eager to get to the action, we now look back and recognize her as the emotional backbone of Hogwarts. Without her, many wouldn't have survived, and fewer would have found comfort in their darkest moments. She is proof that kindness and consistency are their own form of bravery. Her story is one of invisible victories. Every healed wound, every revived student, every tear wiped from a frightened child's cheek, those are her battles won. She never asked for medals, but she earned them. She never stood in the Great Hall to be celebrated, but she deserved it more than most. Her heroism lies in the details, in every careful flick of her wand, in every late-night vigil, in every life she brought back from the brink. If Hogwarts is a home, then Madame Pomfrey is the hearth, warm, reliable, quietly burning, even when the rest of the house shakes. She reminds us that true strength can be found in care, that magic, at its core, is about healing, and that sometimes the greatest warriors never step onto a battlefield, they tend to the wounded left behind. So we remember her now not as a background character, but as the steadfast soul of a school defined by courage, not the kind that charges with a wand raised, but the kind that holds the dying in her arms and says, "You're going to be all right." In the silence between battles, in the moments when everyone else looked away, Madame Pomfrey remained. And in that stillness we find the heartbeat of Hogwarts. Number 22, Dean Thomas. Of all the characters in the Harry Potter saga, Dean Thomas is perhaps one of the most overlooked. In the chaos of heroes, chosen ones, villains, and legends, Dean stood silently in the margins. But as time passes and readers revisit the series with older eyes, a new truth becomes clear. Dean Thomas is a character who, in adulthood, shines with a quiet brilliance. His journey, often obscured by louder stories, is a subtle reminder of resilience, dignity, and the courage to endure without applause. Dean enters the wizarding world not as someone born into it, but as an outsider. A Muggle-born boy raised in London, Dean had no idea magic even existed until his Hogwarts letter arrived. This moment, though barely described, must have been a turning point of immense emotional gravity. Imagine being a boy whose father disappeared under mysterious circumstances when you were a child, whose mother never revealed the truth, and suddenly finding yourself summoned to a castle full of moving staircases and talking portraits. While others, like Ron Weasley or Draco Malfoy, entered Hogwarts with inherited knowledge and family pride, Dean stepped into a world that didn't seem made for him and never flinched. His background holds a quiet tragedy. Readers later learn that Dean's father was a wizard who never told his family about his magical identity, hoping to protect them. He was killed by Death Eaters for refusing to join them, a fact that Dean never knew. In the Tales of Beedle the Bard, J.K. Rowling confirms in her footnotes that Dean believed himself to be Muggle-born because he never knew the truth of his lineage. He carried the burden of this mystery silently, never questioning why his father left, never suspecting the dark heroism behind it. That legacy of sacrifice runs like an invisible thread through Dean's life. He is his father's son in more ways than he knows. At Hogwarts, Dean quickly becomes part of the Gryffindor community. He is sorted into the same house as Harry, Ron, Neville, and Seamus. Yet he never seems to fight for the spotlight. He supports the team, draws banners for Quidditch, cheers on Harry as Seeker, and rarely seeks attention. During Harry's first year, Dean is one of the few students who immediately takes to him, showing enthusiasm and loyalty without condition. When most of the school turns against Harry during the Triwizard Tournament, Dean does not waver. His presence is constant, though rarely centered in the narrative. Dean's character deepens in Order of the Phoenix. While tensions rise at Hogwarts and the Ministry interferes with Dumbledore's leadership, Dean joins Dumbledore's army. He doesn't hesitate. He learns spells, trains with his peers, and puts himself at risk to fight back against injustice. It's here that his quiet bravery begins to emerge. He is not the loudest voice in the room, but he's there, wand in hand, standing beside Neville, Ginny, and Luna. When Dolores Umbridge cracks down on student resistance, Dean continues to show up for training. He knows the world is shifting, and he chooses the side of right, not because it's safe, but because it's just. His relationship with Seamus Finnegan, his best friend, also reveals Dean's strength of character. In Order of the Phoenix, Seamus initially refuses to believe Harry about Voldemort's return. Their friendship is strained, but Dean never disowns him. He remains loyal while standing by his values. This quiet tension, navigating disagreement without abandoning a friend, is a sign of emotional maturity. Many Gryffindors flare with anger or judgment, but Dean seems to possess a steadier fire. He doesn't seek to convince or condemn. He continues to be present, to act and to listen. Later, in Half-Blood Prince, Dean begins dating Ginny Weasley. This relationship is often viewed through the lens of Harry's jealousy, but Dean himself handles the entire situation with dignity. He never taunts Harry, never gloats, never abuses his position. When the relationship ends, it's not due to cruelty or betrayal, but the natural drifting apart of two young people growing at different speeds. Dean walks away quietly, without bitterness. His emotional intelligence once again sets him apart. In a series where heartbreak often leads to conflict, Dean simply accepts the outcome and moves forward. Then comes the darkest period of Dean's life, the events of Deathly Hallows. He is on the run from the Ministry, hunted not for anything he has done, but for what he supposedly is. Because he lacks documentation proving wizard ancestry, Dean is forced to flee. He becomes an exile living in forests and ruins, hiding from snatchers, surviving on scraps. He spends months in fear, not knowing if he will ever return to Hogwarts, see his friends, or even survive. It's here that Dean's true heroism is forged, not on a battlefield, but in the wilderness, in hunger, in silence. Captured by snatchers, Dean is imprisoned in Malfoy Manor alongside Luna Lovegood, Griphook, and Mr. Ollivander. These are scenes of high tension, of despair. Yet Dean, though terrified, remains calm. He comforts Luna, supports Ollivander, and endures the cruelty without breaking. When Harry and his friends arrive to rescue them, Dean does not panic or rush. He follows instructions, guards his companions, and escapes with them into the unknown. That composure, under torture and threat, speaks to a willpower formed in shadow. It is no coincidence that Dean ends the war as a survivor. He fights in the Battle of Hogwarts. He joins the last stand. He's there, wand drawn, defending the castle alongside the giants of the story, Harry, Hermione, Ron, Neville, and yet again he asks for no recognition. He does not boast. He simply fights because it's right. The fact that he appears in the final stand, having endured months on the run, is a testament to his resilience. Not everyone could have returned from such darkness and still found the strength to defend others. In adulthood, Dean's trajectory remains steady. In J.K. Rowling's post-canon information, it is suggested that Dean becomes a successful wizard, perhaps even a professional artist. His love for drawing, first shown through his Quidditch banners and doodles, is not a passing interest but a window into his soul. Even in Hogwarts, surrounded by danger, Dean found time for art. That says everything about his character. He is a builder, not a destroyer. He is someone who preserves beauty in times of war. Dean's story is one of perseverance without glory. He is not a chosen one, not a Horcrux hunter, not the boy who lived, or the girl who defied Bellatrix. He is the boy who endured, the boy who remained kind in a world that turned cruel, the boy who believed in friendship even when it was tested, the boy who ran through forests, slept under roots, shared stolen bread with strangers, and came back to fight for a school that had nearly forgotten him. That, more than any prophecy, is the mark of greatness. As readers age, they begin to value not just bravery in battle, but endurance in silence. Dean Thomas never demands attention. He does not manipulate events. He does not proclaim himself a hero. But he is one. His journey mirrors the journey of many who grow up on the edges of conflict, who are forced to be strong before they understand why. His strength is soft. It is not made of spells or curses, but of steadiness, kindness, and memory. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are legends, but Dean is real. He is the boy you might meet in a hallway, the friend who offers you help without being asked, the classmate who notices when you're hurting and stays behind. That realism, combined with his quiet courage, makes Dean Thomas one of the most relatable and admirable characters in the series, not because he changed the world, but because he survived it without losing himself. In rereading the books, the lines that once seemed minor take on new weight. In Order of the Phoenix, Dean responds to Umbridge's cruel control by sketching anti-ministry banners. It's a small act, but an important one. Resistance comes in many forms, and sometimes a boy with a quill can shake authority more than a boy with a sword. Dean's protest is art. It is identity, is saying, I am still here in a world that tries to erase him. Dean's kindness also leaves a mark. He treats others with fairness. He stands by Neville when others laugh. He does not mock Luna. He respects Hermione. He supports Harry, even when others do not. He is the kind of person you hope to grow into, not perfect, not without flaws, but deeply decent. And in fiction, as in life, decency often speaks louder than destiny. In the Great Hall during the Battle of Hogwarts, when the dust settles and the heroes are counted, Dean is not at the front, but he is there, alive, whole, changed, perhaps forever, by what he has seen, but unbroken. That image, a young man with eyes older than his years, standing among fallen comrades holding his wand like a memory, is one that lingers in the mind. There is power in not being the centre of the story. Dean Thomas is living proof. His life is not a tale of grand gestures, but of thousands of small, brave choices. He reminds us that some heroes are not the ones who speak the loudest or shine the brightest. Some heroes are simply those who never gave up, even when no one was watching. And that, perhaps, is why adult readers love him more with time. Because we, too, begin to understand that real strength lies not in winning every battle, but in showing up for them again and again with kindness intact. Dean Thomas, the boy from the background, never really was in the background at all. He was exactly where he needed to be. Just strong enough, just brave enough, just human enough to be unforgettable. Number 23, Nymphadora Tonks. When Nymphadora Tonks bursts onto the pages of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, she does so with flair. Hair the colour of bubble gum, a grin that threatens to never fade, and the clumsiness of someone still learning the dimensions of their own limbs, Tonks is instantly unforgettable. To a younger reader, she seems like the older sister you'd want, quirky, energetic, rebellious, and fiercely fun. But adulthood brings its own lens, and through it Tonks reveals herself not as a comic relief, but as one of the series' quietest heroes. Her true bravery unfolds not in duels or dramatic moments, but in the moral and emotional choices she makes, choices that cost her dearly and which she embraces without complaint. Tonks is more than her metamorph magus charm, more than her funny hair and endearing awkwardness. Beneath her bright exterior is a woman with deep convictions, trained discipline, and a courageous heart that carries the weight of wartime decisions. Becoming an aura is no small feat. It requires skill, resilience, and a mind sharper than a goblin's ledger. By the time she meets Harry, she is already forged in the crucible of ministry training. She jokes about her mishaps, but she has earned every scar on her spirit. Few women, or wizards of any kind, choose such a perilous path, not for glory, but for justice. That alone deserves admiration. And then there is Remus Lupin. In the whirlwind of war, Tonks falls in love with a man who believes himself unworthy of her. Remus, ever the reluctant soul, carries the burden of lycanthropy like a chain. He is poor, marked, and emotionally broken. He resists her not because he does not love her, he does, but because he fears destroying her life. He tells her she deserves someone younger, someone whole. She refuses. "You see," Tonks says in Half-Blood Prince, "you see what you've been doing. You see why I don't care. You see what I mean about you being just as noble as you always were." Her love for Remus is not teenage infatuation. It is mature, unwavering, and defiant of society's expectations. It is this love that transforms Tonks from a likable character into a profoundly admirable one. She does not chase an idealized version of romance. Instead, she accepts Remus fully, his fears, his flaws, his darkness, and she does so in the thick of a war that could end them at any moment. When others might have chosen safety, she chooses him. She marries not into security, but into a storm. It is the kind of love that doesn't ask what one will gain, but what one is willing to give. Even when the world begins to crumble, Tonks never retreats. After Dumbledore's death, when the ministry falls to Voldemort's shadow, she doesn't flee with her husband into hiding. She joins the resistance. She continues fighting, now not only for the world she believes in, but for the future of the child growing inside her. Yes, Tonks becomes a mother during a time when death knocks at every door. Her decision to stay in the fight while pregnant is not reckless. It is radical love combined with duty. She does not abandon her role as a protector of her family or of the wizarding world. The birth of Teddy Lupin should have been a moment of peace. It should have marked a new chapter, a breath of hope, but the war does not allow such mercy. And yet Tonks makes her most agonizing, most human decision. She leaves Teddy in safe hands and she returns to Hogwarts. Remus has gone to the battle. She will not let him face it alone. In doing so, she chooses to stand beside her love once more, not to die, but to live up to what they believe in. It is a heartbreaking echo of the choices made by Lily and James Potter. The difference is that Tonks knows what she might lose. She chooses it anyway. She dies off page. There are no last words, no goodbyes, no heroic speeches. Remus and Tonks, pale and still and peaceful-looking, apparently asleep beneath the dark, enchanted ceiling. The narration tells us in Deathly Hallows, and that is it. A quiet end, but perhaps that is fitting, for Tonks never fought for recognition. She never shouted her sacrifices. She simply did what needed to be done, and that truly is the mark of heroism. Adult readers feel the tragedy of her loss more sharply. Where once we saw pink hair and giggles, we now see a mother whose child will never know her touch, a wife whose love was brave enough to fight fate, a warrior who believed in light until the last moment. Tonks does not die as a quirky side character. She dies as a symbol of love, of sacrifice, and of all that the war cost. The decision of J.K. Rowling to let Tonks and Remus die was controversial. Some readers saw it as needless pain. Others recognized it as a necessary reminder. War does not spare the kind-hearted. It does not discriminate. And yet there is meaning in their deaths, not in the violence, but in the love they carried to the end. Their legacy lives in Teddy, and unlike Harry, Teddy grows up loved, safe, protected. That is the victory Tonks gives her son. She cannot raise him, but she ensures he will be surrounded by those who will. Tonks also represents a quiet rebellion against expectations. In a world where women are often defined by their beauty, their maternal nature, or their passivity, Tonks defies all three. She is unapologetically herself. Her hair changes with her mood, a symbol of autonomy over her own body. She is not elegant, nor graceful, nor traditionally composed. She is messy, loud, awkward, and utterly genuine. She proves that strength does not require stoicism, and femininity does not require conformity. She is in every sense a modern heroine. She is also deeply relatable. So many adults recognize themselves in her struggle, balancing love and responsibility, facing rejection, stepping into roles that terrify and empower at once. She is the woman who drops things when she's nervous, who loves someone society tells her not to, who shows up anyway. In the world of Harry Potter, where grandeur often steals the spotlight, Tonks shines in her ordinariness, in her imperfections, and in her defiant humanity. Even her grief is portrayed with painful authenticity. After Sirius Black's death, Tonks fades. Her hair loses its color, her spirit dims, she withdraws. She suffers not loudly but inwardly, a mirror to the quiet breakdowns so many experience when loss strikes. It is only her eventual reconciliation with Remus that revives her. But even then she carries the scars. Tonks doesn't magically return to joy. She walks with grief and still chooses to hope. And it is that hope that makes her unforgettable. Tonks teaches us that courage is not just fighting evil, it's choosing love when it's inconvenient, fighting for what is right when it's thankless, and staying true to who you are when the world tries to mold you differently. Her death is not her legacy. Her life is. Every adult who rereads the series finds new depth in her arc. Where once she was comic relief, she becomes a reflection of life's truest battles for love, for identity, for a better world. In the final battle, she and Remus fall together. There is something achingly poetic in that. Two outcasts who found each other, who built a life on the edge of war, choosing to die as they lived together, brave and full of love. Their absence is a wound, but their story is a torch passed on to Harry, to Teddy, to us. No character in the series evolves more in the eyes of the reader than Tonks. Children see her as fun, adults see her as brave. Her arc is not the loudest, but it is perhaps the most honest. She does not have a prophecy. She does not possess a wand of legend. She is not chosen, but she chooses again and again to stand on the side of good. And that makes all the difference. Tonks is the quiet kind of hero who exists in real life more than fiction. She is the nurse who stays past her shift in a pandemic, the woman who raises a child while working nights, the partner who stays when things fall apart. Her magic may be fantasy, but her spirit is achingly real. That is why, as adults, we love her even more. There's something eternal in Tonks, not in her death, but in what she represents. She reminds us that joy and silliness are not childish traits to discard, but shields to carry through darkness. That love is never foolish even when it hurts, that showing up even when you're scared, even when it's hard, is the purest kind of magic. And so, when we think of heroes in the wizarding world, our minds may first leap to Harry, to Dumbledore, to brave Hermione and noble Neville. But look closer. Behind them, somewhere in the background of a battle, is Tonks. Not with a speech, not with a spotlight, just her wand, her heart, and the quiet thunder of a woman who never backed down. Number 24, Fred and George Weasley. There was a time when readers of the Harry Potter series saw Fred and George Weasley as nothing more than comic relief. Their pranks at Hogwarts, their unstoppable grins, and their constant banter made them icons of mischief. They were the tricksters, the misbehaving twins who turned even the darkest school years into a circus of wonder and chaos. As children, we adored them for the laughter they brought. But with age, that perception matures, and what once appeared to be harmless fun reveals layers of bravery, rebellion, loyalty, and unspeakable loss. Fred and George were never just pranksters. Even in their early days at Hogwarts, their humor carried weight. Their jokes often punctured the ego of the powerful. When they famously enchanted snowballs to hit Professor Quirrell in the back of the head, unbeknownst to all, striking Lord Voldemort himself, it was more than childish fun. It was instinctive resistance. Their humor had direction. It laughed in the face of control, of rules of fear. It broke the tension of dark times. What seemed like mischief was, in truth, the first expression of something nobler, courage. By the time the twins reached their final year at Hogwarts, they had begun transforming from boys into men of principle. The school had become a breeding ground for paranoia and authoritarianism under the rule of Dolores Umbridge. Many students either cowered or conformed. Not Fred and George. They became revolutionaries. They did not simply make fun of Umbridge, they actively challenged her reign. Their fireworks display, which terrorized the halls for hours, was not just a stunt, it was protest art, their portable swamp that could not be removed, a physical embodiment of defiance. As Rowling writes in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Fred and George turned to each other and said together, "Time to say goodbye." And just like that, they flew from the castle on broomsticks in daylight and in full rebellion. What they did next showed their real genius. They didn't run away, they built something. Weasley's Wizard Wheezes was more than a joke shop. It was an empire of imagination in the middle of a war-torn world. Diagon Alley, shadowed by fear and suspicion, found in their store a beacon of color and hope. Their success was not just in galleons, though they made plenty, it was in resistance through joy. They sold Peruvian instant darkness powder, shield hats, decoy detonators. To the Ministry these were novelties, to Dumbledore's army and the Order of the Phoenix they were weapons. You don't think we'd have let you out of that contract if we weren't serious about our joke shop, do you? George once teased Ludo Bagman, but the reader now sees the weight behind the words. In times of oppression, humour becomes a weapon. Fred and George wielded it with more skill than many used wands. Their shop became a sanctuary. As Voldemort rose, their creations offered protection, laughter, relief, and, perhaps most vitally, solidarity. In a world slipping into silence, the twins reminded people to laugh. It wasn't escapism, it was resistance. Every fake wand was a tiny act of rebellion. Every skiving snack box handed to a nervous Hogwarts student became a lifeline. And they did it all together. Fred and George were never alone. Their magic was made stronger by their bond. Unlike many characters who faced destiny alone, the twins carried each other. They moved as one, thought as one, and, most heartbreakingly, completed each other. It was not just affection, it was identity. There are countless references in the books to people mixing them up, calling them the twins, speaking of them in plural even when only one was present. But Fred and George were not interchangeable. They were two halves of a whole. and that made what came next all the more devastating. During the Battle of Hogwarts, when the war tore through the stone walls of the castle and death moved in shadows, Fred Weasley fell. He was smiling. He had just made Percy laugh. In that instant, Fred's eyes seemed to stare out of his body, the ghost of his last laugh still etched upon his face. That smile, frozen in time, becomes one of the most painful images in the entire saga. It was not just Fred who died that day. George lost something no magic could restore. George's grief is not shown in long monologues or dramatic scenes. Rowling is subtle, but in that silence lies the tragedy. We are told George couldn't produce a Patronus after Fred's death. We are told he tried to keep the shop going, that he found laughter again, but never completely. The twin magic was broken. What remained was a man with half a soul. Ron once mentioned in Deathly Hallows, George can't bear to be in the shop alone. There is no need to say more. Adult readers understand what children might miss. Grief is not always loud. It lingers in empty rooms, in echoing laughter, in the absence of the other voice. Fred and George had shared everything: their bed, their ideas, their dreams, even their sentences. Now George was left with silence. In that silence lives the understanding that their bond was not mere comedy, but the deepest form of love. In rereading the series, adult fans begin to trace the moments that now seem like foreshadowing. The twins' decision to leave school, their insistence on building something of their own, their generosity toward their younger siblings, especially Ron. "We'll send you loads of stuff," Fred told Ron when they won the Triwizard Gold. "We're going to start a joke shop." They weren't just dreamers, they were protectors. They shared their success with their family. They made lightness out of fear. Fred and George never belittled people. Their jokes had targets, yes, but they often aimed at bullies, frauds, and tyrants. Their humor was not cruelty. It was sharp, but never mean. Peeves the poltergeist respected them. Even McGonagall smiled at their antics. That's how powerful their spirit was. It moved even the sternest hearts. And when they walked away from Hogwarts with fireworks in their wake, it wasn't a childish exit. It was a symbol of moral clarity. In the darkness of war, the twins shined. Their courage was not the kind sung about in ballads. They didn't slay dragons or duel Dark Lords, but they built safe spaces, taught people to laugh again, and reminded everyone of what they were fighting for: life in its fullest, brightest, most ridiculous form. Laughter, in their world, wasn't weakness, it was a declaration. We are still human. This understanding is what breaks the adult heart when Fred falls. He wasn't just a joker, he was a fighter. And George, left in the ruins of that final battle, becomes the image of sacrifice the reader never forgets. Because the pain of losing a twin isn't just losing a sibling, it's losing part of yourself. George tried to live on. He married Angelina Johnson. He had a son and named him Fred. But nothing could undo what was taken. In a world full of heroes, Harry with his scar, Hermione with her books, Ron with his loyalty, it is the twins who capture something purer. Joy as rebellion, family as foundation, identity as shared breath. Their story isn't the loudest, but it is among the most profound. They made people laugh while teaching them to survive. The twins' journey resonates more deeply with each reread. The shop in Diagon Alley becomes a monument. The fireworks, once just brilliant, now look like sparks of hope in a world gone cold. The jokes that once made us chuckle now make us cry. That's the brilliance of Rowling's writing. What once seemed like background becomes the very soul of the story. Fred and George taught a generation that resistance doesn't always look like war. Sometimes it looks like laughter. Sometimes it smells like a fainting fancy's wrapper or sounds like a portable swamp gurgling in a hallway. They showed that facing down evil didn't require prophecy, just guts, love, and a good sense of humor. In losing Fred, readers lost something too, but they also gained perspective. We see George wounded but moving forward. We see the cost of war not in statistics, but in one twin's quiet struggle to breathe without the other. And that perhaps is why the Weasley twins linger in our hearts, not for their tricks, but for their truth. They remind us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is make someone smile when the world is falling apart. Fred and George Weasley, more than mischief makers, they were rebels, they were builders, they were brothers, and in every sense they were heroes. Number 25. Professor Flitwick. Of all the professors who taught at Hogwarts, few remained as quietly exceptional as Professor Phileas Flitwick. He was often portrayed as cheerful, diminutive, and light-hearted, a near caricature in the shadow of larger, more dramatic figures like Snape or Dumbledore. But adulthood brings with it a sharpened perspective, and with time, readers begin to see in Flitwick something they might have missed in their youth, a quiet greatness, a dignity that does not demand recognition, and a warmth that shines even more powerfully in a world so often dominated by fear and pride. Flitwick was the charms master at Hogwarts, and his subject might seem less impressive at first glance than potions or transfiguration. Yet charms is the very backbone of magical civilization. It is the subtle, elegant art of making magic interact with the world, and it requires an exacting intellect. Flitwick wasn't merely good at his craft, he was legendary. He had been a dueling champion in his youth, a fact barely whispered in the books but enough to suggest staggering skill. This tiny professor, whom students sometimes mistook for a stack of books when he sat behind his desk, had once stood in front of packed auditoriums, facing down wizards with a flick of his wand and a precise incantation. His choice to teach rather than pursue glory or politics says everything. At a time when power was something to be brandished, when Voldemort's rise was built on fear and domination, Flitwick chose the quiet path. He chose to educate. He devoted himself to helping others harness their abilities, not for conquest, but for understanding. He rarely raised his voice, and yet his classroom was filled with respect. Students adored him not out of fear, but because he created an environment where learning felt magical again. The levitation charm, Wingardium Leviosa, introduced through him in the Philosopher's Stone, is remembered fondly not only because of Hermione's precociousness, but because of Flitwick's delight in his students' progress. During the Battle of Hogwarts, Flitwick's true power revealed itself, but in a way that remained faithful to his essence. While others made grand stands or dramatic sacrifices, Flitwick worked with efficiency and humility. He fortified the school's defences with complex enchantments, standing shoulder to shoulder with Professors McGonagall and Sprout. He duelled the notorious Death Eater Antonin Dolohov, one of Voldemort's most feared and sadistic followers. That Flitwick bested him is no small detail. It is testament to the fact that beneath his joyful eyes was a wand hand capable of great power and a spirit willing to face danger for the sake of others. In the Deathly Hallows, the urgency of war could have turned any kind man bitter. Yet Flitwick remained kind. He offered sanctuary to students. He protected the younger children. He participated in planning the resistance without hesitation. He was not interested in glory or legacy. He stood for what was right, because it was right. In many ways, his actions were the most Gryffindor of them all, though he was a proud Ravenclaw. Courage, for him, was quiet. It did not roar. It simply stood its ground. And it is no small matter that Flitwick was one of the only adult figures at Hogwarts who consistently treated children with respect. He did not talk down to them, did not mock their fears, or crush their curiosity. In the Goblet of Fire, when Harry is chosen as a champion against his will, many professors, including those who should have known better, react with suspicion or withdrawal. Flitwick, however, remains kind and encouraging, offering his support without pressuring Harry. That matters. That makes a difference in a child's life. Throughout the series, we also see his genuine joy in teaching. He is visibly excited when students succeed. When Ron successfully charms the club to fly in the Chamber of Secrets, it's Flitwick's delighted clapping that signals the success, not scolding or correction, but shared happiness. This is a man who finds fulfillment not in being the center of attention, but in helping others realize their own potential. For a generation raised in systems of hierarchy, that kind of selfless mentorship is gold. There's also the detail, easy to miss, that he never once belittled or shamed Neville Longbottom. This might seem small until you remember how often Neville was mocked, by other professors. Snape tormented him. McGonagall, though kind in her way, sometimes expressed disappointment. But Flitwick? He treated Neville as he treated all students, with patience. He did not expect instant brilliance. He understood that mastery takes time. In doing so, he helped build a space where magic could grow without fear. In The Order of the Phoenix, when Umbridge transforms Hogwarts into a paranoid fortress, Flitwick carefully toes the line between obedience and rebellion. He does not fall over himself to please the ministry, nor does he openly defy her in a way that would harm the students. Instead, he walks the narrow path that keeps the classroom safe and his students protected. When asked to remove the fireworks created by Fred and George, he remarks with a twinkle in his eye, "I could have got rid of them, of course, but I wasn't sure whether I had the authority." That moment is pure Flitwick. Clever, subtle defiance, grounded in principle and delivered with a smile. Unlike other professors, who often overshadow the classroom with their egos, Flitwick left space for his students to grow. He did not demand obedience through fear. He earned it through fairness. His small stature made him an easy target for jokes, but that made his strength all the more admirable. He chose never to impose, he chose to guide, and when it was time to fight, he stood his ground without hesitation, without making a show of it. Flitwick also symbolizes something rare in the wizarding world, the reconciliation of great power with humility. He was not born into a grand lineage, did not seek political office, and never once suggested that others should follow him. Yet when history came knocking, when evil rose, and when children needed protection, he was there, quietly, faithfully, fully present. It's no accident that he helped Hermione perfect the Protean charm for Dumbledore's army. The Protean charm is highly advanced magic, and Flitwick did not hoard it. He saw Hermione's potential, and instead of warning her off or limiting her knowledge, he enabled her growth. That says everything about the kind of mentor he was. A gatekeeper opens doors, but a teacher like Flitwick removes the walls entirely. And while others used their talents for dominance, like Bellatrix, like Voldemort, Flitwick used his for connection. His magic was not about control, it was about possibility. He showed students that magic wasn't just about power, it was about joy. He made Charms class feel like a dance, light, elegant, and precise. That artistry stuck with students long after they left Hogwarts. Even among the staff, Flitwick was beloved. He never engaged in the petty rivalries that soured relationships among others. He respected McGonagall's stern leadership, laughed with Sprout's earthy humour, and maintained polite, quiet boundaries with Snape. His presence on the staff was like a binding charm itself, holding different energies together without dominance, only through grace. There is something deeply moving about a man who could win duels and battles, and yet chooses to spend his days helping first years levitate feathers. It is easy to be fierce. It is much harder to be gentle in a world that rewards strength, and yet Flitwick made gentleness powerful. He made compassion magical, and he did so without ever demanding applause. As adults, we grow to value kindness more than cleverness. We begin to see how rare it is for someone in power to use that power to lift others rather than themselves. And that's why, returning to Hogwarts through the eyes of memory, Flitwick becomes more than a background character. He becomes a quiet giant. His voice may have been squeaky, his head barely reached the podium, but his legacy towers. He showed what it means to live with integrity, to teach with love, to fight when it's time to fight, and to step back when others need to shine. The world needs more of that. When the war ended, there was no parade for Flitwick, no statue, no great reward, but perhaps that's just how he would have wanted it. He returned to his classroom, dusted off the books, and smiled at the next group of students entering through the door. Because magic, to him, was never about making history. It was about making a difference. And he did, every single day.